I never imagined my life could turn into a nightmare so quickly. One moment, I was happily married to the most beautiful woman I'd ever known. The next, I walked in on a betrayal so deep it shattered my soul. I saw her with him, my best friend, in our bed. The rage, the betrayal, the unthinkable pain. It was all consuming. I confronted him, and in that moment, everything changed. My heart turned cold, my mind raced with thoughts of vengeance. This isn't just a story of infidelity, it's a story of revenge, of a man pushed to his limits. "Hey, boss." "Morning," Jake said back. "When did noon become morning?" Garrett asked, looking at his watch. Jake smiled. This was their usual routine. Since Jake owned the place, he didn't show up at 10 o'clock like Garrett, his longtime manager, who opened the bar and got everything ready for lunch at 11:30. Jake usually strolled in around noon, and Garrett loved to tease him about it. Jake was not just his boss. He considered Garrett a close friend. Their wives got along well, and they trusted each other like brothers. "Did the food delivery arrive yet?" Jake asked. "Yeah, the truck came about an hour ago." "Great. Did you check the meat this time? They gave us some that was almost expired last time." "It's kosher," Garrett replied with a smug smile. He had worked for Jake for almost 10 years, first as a bartender and then as a manager. He rarely forgot anything Jake asked him to do. Most of the time, Garrett just took care of things on his own, and Jake appreciated that, even if he liked to playfully catch him off guard. Jake grinned. "I'll catch you one of these days, buddy. That grin of yours won't last." Garrett laughed, but then looked serious. "Oh, I wanted to ask you something. Would you and your band play Saturday night instead of Friday? Benny Rodriguez and his car club want to hold their get-together here on Friday." Jake raised his eyebrows. "Don't they usually meet at Stibbins?" he asked, naming another bar in town. "They do, but they want to change this time, and when he asked me, I couldn't say no. It's good for business. Those guys like to drink." Jake thought about it. He had tried for years to get Benny's car club to come to his bar, and now— "Wait," Jake said. "You already booked them. Why are you asking me?" He already knew why, but this was part of their game, so he waited for Garrett's response. Garrett was about to answer when a server interrupted with another of her daily questions. Most of the time, the questions were silly, like, "What's in a martini?" But anyone who has worked in the food service knows there are no silly questions. Jake chuckled quietly and let Garrett get back to work. As the owner of the Bacon Bar and Grill, Jake didn't usually manage the day-to-day tasks. Garrett and the other manager, Karen, handled that part well. Jake was more of a supervisor, making sure everything ran smoothly. Plus, he loved playing music. That was one of the best parts of owning a bar. His band always had a place to perform. Jake looked around the bar. The lunch crowd was busy, and the room was full. It wasn't a large place, just a 14-seat bar and 25 tables, but it was all his. Watching his staff work like a well-oiled machine made him proud. It took many years to get to this point. He was happy. He owned a business, was married to the love of his life, and had 2 stepkids he adored. Life was good, but it hadn't always been this way. "Hey, Jake!" someone shouted from across the room, bringing him back to reality. Jake turned to see Casper Jones, the drummer of his band, sitting at a table with a few friends. He walked over, but halfway there he noticed a girl around 18 or 19 sitting alone. A feeling of familiarity hit him, and he locked eyes with her for a moment. Then, just as quickly, it faded. Shaking his head, Jake broke the stare and continued to join Casper. "What the heck, man? Why are we moving the gig to Saturday?" Casper complained. Some people at the nearby tables looked over but quickly returned to their conversations. Jake shook his head and laughed. Casper was the wild one in the band. He was still single and probably would always be. A new girl every week was typical for him, but he was a great drummer and fun to be around. "Garrett told you already, didn't he?" Jake stated. "Yeah, what's the deal?" Jake grinned. "You mean your plans for Friday night got messed up?" Casper looked shocked for a moment, then burst out laughing. Jake and the others joined in. "Can't get anything past you, Jake," Casper said. "You're a predictable guy, Casper. We all know you only joined the band for the girls," Jake joked, which made everyone laugh even harder. "Well, who can blame me?" Casper replied. "Girls love drummers." But moving to Saturday messes up my plans, man. I'll have to cancel on the girl I was going to see." "Why?" Sean, one of Casper's friends, asked. "What do you mean, why?" Casper had a surprised look. Seeing no one understood, he said, "The girl I was going to be with on Friday said she would do something special for me before the show. Now she can't." The whole table, except Casper, laughed again. Casper's face stayed serious. "So why can't she come Saturday?" Sean asked through his laughter. "Yeah, Casper," Jake pushed, curious about his response. "Seems like an easy fix to me." "Just have them change nights." "But Cindy, my girl for Friday night?" "Ms. Fun?" Sean interrupted with a smirk. "Yeah," Casper replied, ignoring the chuckles from the table. "Cindy said she'd only help me before I play because I'll be too sweaty afterward." Everyone was shocked. They didn't expect that answer at all. In fact, it wasn't even on most of their minds. What made it surprising was how serious Casper sounded. For a few seconds, no one said anything. Then suddenly, chaos erupted. Sean fell to the floor. His friend Carl gasped for air, and Jake stumbled back, bumping into the table. A guy at that table spilled his drink. Jake was laughing so hard he couldn't fix things, but thankfully Garrett was quick to help out while the busboy cleaned up. Once Jake calmed down, he apologized to the guy and offered to pay for his meal, which helped smooth things over. Jake turned back to the table as Sean asked, "Casper, what does that have to do with anything? You're not making sense." Jake couldn't help but chuckle. That was the same question he was thinking. "What do you mean I'm not making sense?" Casper asked, looking confused. "What Sean means, Casper, is that you should invite Cindy to the show on Saturday and ask your girl for Saturday to hang out on Friday," Carl explained, sounding like a father explaining something tricky. Casper thought for a moment and smiled. "Oh, that might work." Jake shook his head. "Okay, guys, I need to get back to work." Then, in a joking tone, he asked, "Could you do me a favor, Sean and Carl?" "Sure," Sean replied, and Carl nodded. "Make sure Casper here knows that today is Wednesday, and that Saturday is 3 days from now, not 2. He turned and walked away. As he left, he heard Sean and Carl burst out laughing again, and Casper said, "I know the days of the week, jerk." Jake chuckled as he walked back to the kitchen. He liked Casper. The guy was a little clueless, but he was fun to be around. As the lunch crowd finally went down, Jake found a quiet table to look over the books. He was trying to find a way to cut costs on some expensive items when he felt someone watching him. He looked up and saw the same girl sitting at the table. She was staring right at him. When their eyes met, he felt a strange sense of déjà vu again. It was odd that she had been sitting there for almost 2 hours. Why was she looking at him like that? Why did she seem so familiar? This was the second time he had eye contact with her, and it felt strong. But, like before, it faded quickly. He decided to figure it out. He looked at her closely. It was hard to tell since she was sitting down, but she seemed to be about 5'7" inches, with straight, shoulder-length brown hair, a bit messy. She had brown eyes and olive skin. She was a little skinny, but not too much. She wore a white t-shirt and jeans that looked like they needed washing. Overall, she was pretty for a girl around 18 or 19, if that's what you liked. At 38, he definitely didn't. After studying her a moment longer, he looked down at his books, trying to remember who she was. He could have sworn he had seen her before. Boss? Huh. Jake snapped back to reality. He looked up to see Garrett with the daily sales printouts. Most restaurant owners wait until the end of the day to check totals, but Jake liked to do it throughout the day. It helped him see how things were going and if they needed changes. "Looks like we did better than expected. We're up about 10% from what we thought," Garrett said with a smile. Since he was the day manager, good lunch numbers meant good news for him. The same went for Karen if dinner was good. But Jake learned long ago that if numbers were down, it was all on him. Funny how that worked. "Great," Jake replied, a bit distracted as he glanced back at the girl. "When do I get my raise?" Garrett asked. Jake knew that would be Garrett's response. It always came after good numbers. He focused back on Garrett, who was wearing a smug grin. "So what you're saying is that when the numbers go up, you deserve a raise, is that right?" Jake asked. "Well, yeah." "Okay, so if that's how it works, when the numbers are down, can I lower your pay?" "Nope. You know it doesn't work like that." "Oh yeah? Why not?" Double standards, boss. Didn't you know that? Jake tried to keep a straight face, but failed, which sent them both into laughter. They both knew Jake paid Garrett well, and this was just part of their ongoing joke. Once their laughter faded, Jake said, "Seriously, though, that's great news. I was just looking at the numbers." He pointed at the papers in front of him. "And our profits have improved on a bunch of things. Our food costs are right where they should be again, but there's always room to improve." Garrett sat down, grabbed the papers from Jake, and started looking through them himself. "Yeah, I see what you mean." Then he pointed to another column of numbers. "It looks like our problem with spilling drinks has been fixed." "Yeah, and don't you take any credit for that. It's all Karen's work." Garrett laughed. "Me? Take credit for someone else's hard work? Never." Jake smirked. "Okay, wise guy. Is the kitchen getting ready for dinner?" "No, they're having a silly meeting back there." "Good. Then you can go join them. Now get out of here before I give you real work to do." With a grin, Garrett stood up and went back to work. Jake turned his attention to the girl who was a mystery to him. This time, when he looked at her, she wasn't looking back. He took the chance to study her without it being awkward. She seemed familiar. Why couldn't he remember her? Suddenly, she looked up and caught him staring. When their eyes met, he noticed she looked nervous. This was odd. Jake didn't know what to think. After a few more moments, he made a choice. He would go talk to her. He stood up and walked over to her. Their eyes stayed locked, and when she realized he was coming closer, her nervousness turned to fear, which surprised Jake for a moment. He didn't want to scare her. He was a big guy at 6'2" and 220 pounds, with some tattoos, but he had a kind face. Still, he was determined to find out who she was, so he kept going. "Excuse me, miss," Jake said politely when he reached her table. "Is it okay if I sit with you?" At first, she didn't answer. It looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't. After a few awkward moments, she gave a slight nod. "Thank you," he said, sitting down. "I'm Jake. What's your name?" She just stared at him, and again, he could see she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. After a few more awkward moments, Jake realized that he would need to keep the conversation going. "Are you from here?" he asked. She paused and shook her head. Okay, so she wasn't from around here. He needed to dig a little deeper. "Do I know your parents?" This seemed to shock her. Her eyes widened and her lip trembled, which made Jake quickly back off. It was clear she didn't want to talk about her parents. He needed a new approach. With a friendly smile, he said, "Sorry if I upset you. That wasn't my plan. Have you eaten?" "I haven't, and I was wondering if you'd join me for lunch." Again, she didn't answer in words, but gave a small nod. Jake smiled back at her and then called over Sophie, a red-headed server. "Hey, boss, what do you need?" Sophie asked. "We're both hungry. Can you order me a buffalo chicken bacon sandwich without fries? And can you ask my friend here what she wants?" He glanced at the girl. He did this to get her to talk. He was starting to feel like she might be shy. She hesitantly said after a few moments. "I'll have a burger if that's okay." Well, at least she wasn't completely silent. "How about the bacon cheeseburger?" Sophie suggested. "It's amazing. Ask Jake here." She pointed to him. Jake laughed. "It really is. There's a reason this place is called the Bacon Bar and Grill. Everything has bacon in it. And if I may say, our bacon is the best around." Sophie laughed too, and for the first time the girl managed a little smile which made him pause. That smile looked familiar. Where had he seen that before? "Okay, I'll have that," the girl said. "Do you want anything to drink?" asked Sophie. Jake turned to the girl, encouraging her to go first. He wanted her to open up and help him solve the mystery. She looked at him, confused, until she realized he wanted her to order. She looked surprised, but then that smile returned, wider this time, as if she understood what he was trying to do. He laughed, and she returned his laugh. Then something hit him. That laugh. He had heard it before a long time ago, but it wasn't coming from the girl in front of him. It was the laugh of his ex-wife, who had made his life so hard he almost didn't recover. He looked into the girl's eyes, which looked a lot like his own, and suddenly he knew who she was. His heart raced, his face felt hot, his hands got sweaty. Tears started to well up in his eyes. "It can't be true, it can't be true," he kept repeating in his mind. He didn't know how long he sat there, but Sophie brought him back to reality. You okay, boss? You look like you've seen a ghost. Jake broke eye contact with the girl and looked at Sophie. His voice shook. Can you give us a moment, please? She nodded quickly and walked away with a concerned look. Jake turned back to the girl, and when their eyes met again, he saw that she knew he had figured it out. He cleared his throat. Ash! Ashley, is that really you? She nodded, trying to hold back her tears, but they flowed down her cheeks. Jake was stunned. He couldn't keep his tears back either. They fell freely, but he didn't care. He was finally seeing Ashley, his little girl. He couldn't believe it. No longer a little girl, but a young woman standing in front of him. Yet he could still see the little girl he lost when she was just 3. He had waited for this moment for so long, planning what he would say. But now he felt lost for words. Still, he knew he needed to speak. With tears streaming down his face, he managed to say, "I can't believe it's you." She stared back at him, drinking in his looks, also at a loss for words. The silence stretched longer, both of them still crying. Jake broke the quiet again. "It's so great to see you. You have no idea how long I've waited for this." Her face changed right away. Now she looked angry. "Oh, you dreamed of this? Then why didn't you ever come for me?" That question hit him hard. Did she really not know? He looked into her eyes, trying to see if she might be lying. But she wasn't. All he could do was shake his head and sigh. This wasn't going to be easy. He should have expected this. His ex-wife must have twisted things, as she always did. He needed to know what she thought she knew. "Ashley, sweetheart," he said softly, "I think we have a lot to talk about. But I want you to know, I would never have given you up." Ashley glared at him, suspicion in her eyes. It was clear she had been lied to all her life. "I don't understand," she asked. "What does that mean?" Jake took a deep breath. "It would help if you told me what you've been told. Then we can move forward." She kept glaring, a familiar look that reminded him of her mother. Wow, she looks just like her. I hope she doesn't act like her. "Okay," she said reluctantly. "Where should I start?" "Tell me what you were told about me." "I was told you hurt me, hurt Mom, then tried to take me away. So, Mom went to Kevin for help, and he said she should get a divorce and ask for full custody." Her tone showed she didn't really believe what she had just said. She was questioning everything, trying to understand what made sense. Jake found it intriguing and wanted to help her make sense of it all. But he had to be careful. She was delicate right now. He desperately wanted to hug her, but he held back. She was there for more reasons than she was showing, and he didn't want to mess it up. Looking her in the eye, he said gently, "Sweetheart, it seems like you don't really believe everything you just said." He paused to watch her reaction. He was right. Her eyes widened and her cheeks turned red. He needed to fix this. "Ashley, you're right to doubt those things. They're all lies." He thought back to what she had said. "Well, almost all lies. Kevin did tell your mom to get a divorce and ask for full custody, but that's about it." Just then, Sophie walked in with food and drinks. She set them down and quickly said, "Sorry for the interruption. Please ignore me," then rushed away. Jake looked at his food but lost his appetite. However, Ashley stared at her burger like she hadn't eaten in a while. That made him think. Her messy hair, her dirty clothes, and now her hungry gaze. He started to worry. His daughter was in distress. Something wasn't right, and he was determined to find out what was going on. "Let's take a break and eat," he suggested. "We can talk more after." "I'm starving," he lied. Ashley nodded and gave a small smile before digging in eagerly. Still, he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. She had been in the restaurant for over 2 hours. Surely she must have eaten earlier, yet she was acting like she hadn't. "You know what?" he said, pretending to remember something. "I need to check on something. I'll be right back. You okay here?" Ashley just nodded, her mouth too full to speak. Jake walked to the kitchen area where he found Sophie talking to Garrett and Joel. When they saw him coming, they stopped and stared. "What's up, man?" Garrett asked. "Everything cool?" Jake shrugged. "Yeah, I guess." "Look," he said, holding up a hand to stop Sophie from speaking. "I don't have time for a long story. That girl," he pointed back at Ashley, "is my daughter, Ashley. I haven't seen her in 13 years. Everyone's jaws dropped in shock, especially Garrett's. He knew Jake's past well, while Sophie only knew part of it. Garrett opened his mouth to speak, but Jake raised his hand again, stopping him. I can't chat right now, but I need to ask Sophie something. Did she order any food earlier? He nodded toward Ashley. Not much, just some fries and water. What's this all about, Jake? Garrett asked. But Jake was too focused to reply. Fries were the cheapest item on the menu, and water was free. With this knowledge, Jake felt sure he was right about something, and it was making him sad. Hey, Jake! Huh? Jake snapped back to reality. He glanced at Garrett. What did you say? Garrett laughed. Nothing. You were just somewhere else for a moment. Jake sighed. Yeah, I've got a lot on my mind right now. By the way, he said, changing the topic, I need to leave early today. Can you tell Karen when she arrives? Garrett nodded. Sure thing. Thanks, Jake said as he stood to leave. If I don't see you before I go, I'll see you tomorrow. Sounds good, boss. Then Jake had a thought. He turned back and said, Oh, Sophie. Yeah? Could you bring a vanilla bacon sundae to Ashley, please? He didn't wait for an answer and walked over to his daughter. When he reached the table, Ashley was finishing her burger. She was definitely hungry. Jake sat down and watched her eat, still trying to believe this was Ashley sitting in front of him. He looked at her face and knew he needed to help her. He didn't know everything, but he had seen enough to know he had to do something. When she noticed him staring, she blushed. He smiled back at her. She looked much happier than before. Then she glanced at his untouched sandwich. I thought you were starving. He smiled to reassure her. Oh, don't worry. I'm often too busy to eat. It doesn't bother me, he lied. Are you still hungry? You can have my sandwich if you want. No, I'm full. You were right. The burger was really good. Jake smiled and her blush deepened. But not too full for dessert, Sophie said, placing the sundae in front of Ashley. The sight of the big vanilla sundae topped with nuts, sprinkles, caramel, and bacon made Ashley's eyes go wide. Ashley looked between Sophie and the sundae, then gave a smile that made Jake's heart feel warm. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her in a long time. But then her smile faded. It looks amazing, but I'm full, she said quickly. But the look in her eyes and her tone told Jake she didn't really mean it. He guessed she might be short on money and didn't want to say so. He had to think fast. He didn't want to hurt her feelings. Yes, she was his daughter, and usually there's nothing wrong with a dad buying his daughter food, but this wasn't just any situation. This is for both of you, Sophie said. It's really big. I've never been able to finish one by myself. Jake shot Sophie a thankful look. She was smart and seemed to sense what was going on without knowing all the details. Turning back to Ashley, Jake met her eyes, which narrowed as if to say, I know what you're doing. Jake held her gaze until a small smirk appeared on her face. Sophie wasn't the only clever one. They looked at each other for a moment longer. Then Jake picked up a fork since Sophie only brought one spoon and started eating. A moment later, Ashley joined him. That was weird, Sophie murmured. Jake looked up, confused, his mouth too full to talk. Sophie looked back, amused. You really don't get it, do you? Jake glanced at Ashley, trying to see if she knew what Sophie meant. Her expression showed she was just as puzzled. That smirk, Sophie said, pointing to Ashley. It's just like yours, boss. Jake turned to Ashley and saw her matching surprised look. Then, almost at the same time, they both grinned. Sophie laughed. Wow, the grin too? I can't believe you didn't notice before. Just look at her eyes. That made Jake laugh loudly, and Ashley giggled, sending chills down his spine. Wow, that laugh sounds a lot like my ex. Then it hit him. Before he knew Ashley was his daughter, he recognized that smirk. It never occurred to him that it was his own. Now it seemed so clear. She had his eyes and some of his expressions. It was obvious they were related. Boss? Thanks, Sophie, Jake said, coming back to the moment. We're all good here. Sophie nodded and turned to Ashley. It was nice to finally meet you, Ashley. Your dad has told us a lot about you over the years. Ashley looked surprised, glancing nervously between Sophie and Jake. After a moment, she nodded slightly. Nice to meet you too, Sophie. As Sophie walked away, she called back, Hope to see you again. Ashley watched Sophie leave for a few seconds before turning back to Jake. His heart sank when he saw tears in her eyes. He reached out to take her hand. At first, she pulled back, but then she let him hold it. "Ashley, sweetheart, are you okay?" With her eyes down and in a soft voice, she asked, "You talked about me?" Jake sighed. The light moments they had shared were over. They both knew they had to face the truth. "Ashley," he said gently, "I have never stopped thinking about you." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. He could see she wanted to believe him, but a lifetime of pain made her think he was a bad man. It was clear that she was struggling with some big thoughts. The way she acted made him think something must have happened recently to make her doubt everything she had been told. It was like the pieces of a puzzle didn't fit together anymore, and now she felt lost and unsure. He wanted to know what had changed, but he didn't want to push her. After holding his gaze for a moment, everything broke. But why would Mom lie to me all these years?" she asked, shaking as her body shook with tears. Without thinking, Jake stood up and quickly wrapped his arms around his daughter. He was surprised she let him, but he held her close and didn't let go. He let her cry on his chest, ignoring the few people still eating around them. "Why?" Ashley's cries filled the air. "Why would she lie to me?" He rubbed her back gently, whispering, "Shh, it's okay, sweetheart, just let it out." He kept saying it, feeling his own eyes fill with tears. It felt good to hold his little girl again after so many years. It broke his heart that she had been lied to and hurt by his ex-wife. It wasn't fair to twist a sweet girl's mind against her father. All he wanted was to take her pain away, but he couldn't. The best he could do now was to comfort her. Then his phone started buzzing in his pocket. It was ringing with a tune that told him it was his wife. Not wanting this moment to end, he decided to ignore it. "Aren't you going to answer?" Ashley asked, her voice muffled. "No." It was a simple answer, but it said a lot. It meant, "You're what matters to me right now. Everything else can wait." After a few more moments of tears, Ashley pulled back, asking to be let go. He didn't want to, but this was about her, not him. Before he released her, he gave her a kiss on the top of her head. That made her stop and look up with teary, questioning eyes. Jake held her gaze, and for a moment, they both seemed to understand something. Finally, instead of pulling back, Ashley hugged him tighter. "Why did she lie to me?" Ashley asked softly, but there was strength in her voice. Now she really wanted to understand. The way she asked had changed. It was no longer, "Why would she lie to me?" but "Why did she lie to me?" That small difference meant a lot. Jake knew she deserved the truth, but he didn't know all the answers himself. He had his own thoughts, but had never gotten a clear answer from his ex about why she hurt him. Sighing, he said, "Honestly, I don't know why she did what she did. I've wondered about it 1,000,000 times." Ashley pulled back and sat down. He returned to his seat and noticed the table was cleared. Their ice cream sundae was gone, and only their drinks and some napkins were left. He looked over to see Sophie and Joel watching them with smiles. Sophie winked at him, making him chuckle. "Sophie's really nice," Ashley said, noticing the exchange. Jake handed her a napkin. "Yeah, she is. I'm lucky to have her." "Thanks," Ashley said as she wiped her eyes and blew her nose. "Can you tell me what happened now? I really need to know." There was a sense of urgency in her tone. Jake nodded. "I'll tell you everything I can. You deserve the truth." He took a sip of his drink, preparing himself for a tough talk. He then started, "Your mom and I met in high school." "I know that part," Ashley interrupted. "You, Mom, and Kevin went to high school together. Mom dated Kevin first, but then you dated her and got married after high school. Then she had me." She seemed to be reciting the basics she had heard growing up. "But it's what happened after that doesn't make sense." Jake nodded. "Did she tell you I was a musician?" "Yeah. She said you were a wannabe rock star who couldn't let go of his dreams." He laughed a little. "Well, she wasn't wrong about the rock star part." Ashley's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "When we dated, your mom loved that I was a musician. I played in bands since I was 14. By high school, I was in a successful band that played a lot. She came to every show. She loved it. When we graduated, your mom wanted to get married, and so we did." "Did you love her?" Ashley asked. "With all my heart. I thought she was amazing. I wanted to ask her to marry me, but I thought it wouldn't be cool. Adults got married and that seemed boring. But when she brought it up, I bought a ring the next day. Then his smile faded. What doesn't make sense is that she loved me back. Ashley frowned at that. Things were good after we got married. I was working as a bartender at a beach club during the week. I was making good money and playing music on the weekends. Your mom was answering phones at a spa. What happened next? Ashley asked, sounding upset. Jake could see her thinking hard. How did it all go so wrong? I really don't know, he said honestly. Things were good. Your mom was pregnant, and we were saving up to buy a house. Jake stopped for a moment, looking into the distance. He sighed and continued. When you were born, everything got even better. She was so happy. We both were. Or at least I thought we were. Ashley looked at him with doubt. He could tell she was trying to compare his story with what she had heard before. And then, just before your 3rd birthday, everything fell apart, he said, frowning. One day I came home and found your mom and Kevin in bed together. He felt embarrassed, realizing he had said too much. Ashley did not react to his mistake. She had a serious look on her face. She didn't like where the story was going. Imagine my shock to see the woman I loved with that guy, he said. I never liked Kevin. We knew each other, but there was something about him that bothered me. I knew they dated in high school, but your mom never said they were still close. Jake paused, searching for the right words. He sighed and went on. Looking back, what I did next made everything worse, and I'm sorry for that. He waited, watching her face for a reaction, but she looked blank. He continued, I lost it. I grabbed him and hit him, broke his nose and some ribs, and what made it worse was that your mom was trying to protect him. The memory still hurt him deeply. He came back to the moment when he felt Ashley's hand in his. He looked at her and saw anger in her eyes, but he knew it was not aimed at him. She was angry about how they were treated by someone who said she loved them. Still holding her hand, Jake lifted it to his mouth and kissed it softly to show his gratitude. She smiled back a little. Any doubt she had about her mom faded there. Yes, she looked like her mom, but she was kind like him. That meant a lot, considering who raised her. Jake sighed again and continued. I was so mad and hurt that I stormed out with you in some of your clothes, and I went to my mom's house. Where was I when Mom and Kevin were, in bed? She asked suspiciously. You were in your room. Ashley frowned at that. What happened next? I don't remember much. Everything is a blur, but the next day the police came and arrested me for fighting and suspicion of kidnapping. Jake shuddered, thinking back to that day. Finding his wife with another man was terrible enough, but it being with Kevin made it even worse. He never saw it coming. Until that day, everything seemed fine. That's awful! Ashley shouted, pulling him from his thoughts. Jake looked at her, questioning. She was deep in her own thoughts. Ashley? Jake called, trying to get her attention. Coming back to reality, Ashley exclaimed, She lied to me! She totally lied to me! This time, Jake reached across the table and took her hand to comfort her. It broke his heart to see her upset. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, was all he could say. She was angry, and he guessed why. He knew his ex's side of the story from court papers, and it was clear she had been told that version. But he was amazed at how quickly she believed him. Just a little while ago, she had doubted him. Now, he could see her making connections and filling in the blanks. Slowly, she seemed to be figuring things out. He wondered what made her question what she'd been told. He needed to hear her side, but first, he needed to finish his. Are you okay? He asked softly. Do you want to stop for now? No, I need to know. She lied to me. She said you hurt her and threatened to take me away if she told anyone. She paused, looking for his reaction. Jake kept his face calm. This was what he expected. This was his ex's story. She told me Kevin found out the truth and tried to help her. When you found out she told Kevin, you hurt him and took me, just like you said you would. He grimaced. Yeah, that sounds like your mom's version. You knew that? Yeah, I read it in the court papers. I was shocked when I saw them. Court papers? Jake sighed, feeling heavy again. Yes, court papers. After I got arrested, your mom, with Kevin's help, made a lot of false claims. Besides the fighting charges, she filed for divorce, saying I was cruel. Tears filled his eyes. And to make things worse, she tried to take my rights as a parent, saying I hurt you." "How could she do that?" Ashley said, angry. "Isn't proof needed for claims like that?" He wiped his eyes. "Well, she had bruises on her." That made Ashley's eyebrows raise. Seeing her reaction, Jake continued to calm her fears. "I've never been able to find out for sure, but I think one of two things happened. She might have gotten the bruises when she jumped in to help Kevin, or she might have hurt herself to support her story." Jake watched Ashley's face for her reaction to his thoughts. Her eyes were narrowed, and he could see she was deep in thought. When she didn't reply, he continued, "And about those claims against me, you were coached to say those things." That statement really surprised her. "What?" Her loud reaction made him flinch. He quickly glanced around, remembering they were in his workplace. Thankfully, the place was almost empty. They were in that awkward time between lunch and happy hour that all restaurant owners dislike. Looking back at her, he was taken aback by her anger. She had shown some anger before, but now she was really upset. "What do you mean I was coached?" she asked through clenched teeth. Jake took a deep breath and tried to be gentle. "There's no easy way to say it. You were coached. A few days later, my mom helped me. Then I got divorce papers. There was also an order saying I couldn't go near you, your mom, or your house. I was so shocked that I went to your house thinking it had to be a mistake. I told myself she wouldn't do this to me." The claims of me being abusive were hard to take, but the fact that she said I hurt you almost broke me. He paused, looking at Ashley's reaction. She seemed impatient, so he pressed on. "Well, I went there and chaos broke out. Kevin was there. Your mom started yelling all sorts of things. I just wanted to see you, but they wouldn't let me, and I panicked. Before I knew it, the police were there, and I was back in jail. Because I broke the order, I couldn't get bail and had to stay in jail until my trial." "But how was I coached?" Ashley asked, still angry and wanting answers. "I'm getting to that, sweetheart. It's just easier to tell it this way. Is that okay?" He wanted to finish this story quickly because it still hurt to talk about. Ashley nodded. "Now, where was I?" Jake asked himself, thinking hard to find his place. "Oh, right," he said. "My lawyer talked me into taking a deal. Honestly, I wasn't too worried about the attack charge. I knew I did hurt him badly. I was more worried about everything else. So I took the deal and ended up with 6 months and a fine. I could have gotten a year, but the judge was nice. Money was tight since your mom and Kevin took everything from me. Luckily, my lawyer helped me out even though I couldn't pay much." "Did you try to fight the divorce?" Ashley asked. Jake shook his head. "No. The moment she cheated, the marriage was over for me. I only cared about you." That made Ashley smirk, his smirk. Taking a sip of water, he continued. "While I was in jail, your mom kept trying to get me to sign the divorce papers. But I wouldn't sign if she didn't agree to share custody. When I got out, the judge said I could see you, but with someone watching." Jake paused, knowing he was about to share something she might not like. In a soft voice, he said, "You walked in with a social worker, saw me, screamed, and started to cry." Ashley looked shocked. But I don't remember that." "You were not even 4 years old then, sweetheart." But Ashley looked horrified by this news. She seemed to blame herself for what her mother did. He needed to stop that feeling right away. "Ashley, please look at me." She looked at him. "This is not your fault, do you understand?" "But why can't I remember any of this?" she asked quietly, her eyes looking down. Jake reached for her hand again. "It's not your fault," he said firmly. "Your mother did this, not you. We are both victims." She lifted her head and met his gaze. Her lip trembled. After a moment, she nodded, but Jake wasn't sure she truly believed him. Ashley cleared her throat and said, "The last memory I have of you is right before we moved. I don't remember much, but there was a red teddy bear. I remember being scared, but not why." "That was right after your 5th birthday. I remember it like it was yesterday," he said, thinking back to that day that was likely the worst. Coming back to the present, he continued, "After that first meeting when you screamed, the social worker told the court about your behavior, and I was about to lose you forever. But I wasn't giving up, so I had my lawyer ask for an expert to talk to you. Your mom didn't want that, but the judge finally agreed. It was clear to the expert that you were coached, and she wrote that in her report. But the harm was done. You were terrified of me. Tears streamed down Ashley's face. Jake let go of her hand, lifted both of his to her cheeks, and wiped away the tears. His little girl was hurting, and he needed to comfort her. "What happened next?" she asked quietly, seeming afraid to know. "Another 1.5 years of pain," he replied flatly. "We fought over you, money, everything. It was surreal. Looking at your mom during that time felt like seeing a stranger. She went from the woman I loved to someone cruel and filled with hate." "You don't know what went wrong?" Ashley asked desperately, struggling to understand her mother. "It's clear Kevin was behind it. Like I said earlier, I sort of knew him, but there was just something about him I didn't like. Until the day I found them in bed, I had no idea anything was wrong." "I was such a fool," he said, shaking his head. After taking a sip of water, Jake carried on, a sad expression on his face. "In short, even though I never hurt you, your mother made you believe terrible things about me. Because of that, it seemed best for the child to give her full custody." "But why? That's so unfair." "Yes, it really is. It's tough, but usually the mother gets custody in these situations. You were so scared of me that they thought it was safer if I didn't see you anymore. The last time I saw you was the day after your 5th birthday. I gave you a red teddy bear, hoping for a miracle to get you back. But by then, it was too late. You didn't want to be near me." Tears began to roll down his cheeks. "A few days later, even though it broke my heart, I signed the divorce papers, losing you for good." Silence filled the room. They both sat with tears on their faces, taking in what had just been said. Jake hadn't talked about this in years. He still thought about it sometimes, but talking about it again brought all those feelings back. He had only shared this with 2 people, Garrett and his wife, the one who had saved him and helped him start over. That was years ago. Thinking of her made him smile. She would be just as surprised as he was about Ashley showing up. My wife. I need to call her back, he remembered, thinking of the missed call. He looked at Ashley. She was staring off into space. "Ashley," he said gently. She came back to reality, but her eyes looked lost. "Are you okay?" She shrugged. "I've been trying to understand everything. You've helped, but it just feels so unfair. Mom lied to me for years, and I still don't know why." Jake sighed. He understood her pain. He had felt that way for a long time. "I can't tell you why, sweetheart. Your mom did what she did, but what matters now is that you're here." Ashley didn't answer right away. She was now trying to read his feelings. He had just touched on something important, the real reason she had come. If his story was the big elephant in the room, hers was another huge weight. What did she want? Did she want to stay, or was she only here to get answers? Did her mother know where she was? Did she ever get the letters he had sent? The questions went on and on. Jake knew what he wanted, but what about her? He decided they both needed a moment to think. He knew how hard it was to have someone you loved lie to you. He had experienced that briefly, but Ashley had been lied to nearly her whole life. That must have been so much worse for her. "I think it's time for a break," Jake said. "I know I need one. I have to use the bathroom and make a call. Is that all right with you?" "Yeah, that's a good idea. I need to go to the bathroom, too." "Okay, follow me. I'll show you where it is." They both knew that the conversation wasn't over. There was still so much to say, but Jake hesitated. She had just gone through a lot, and his protective side wanted to avoid causing her more pain. Yet he was curious. He wanted to help, but he needed to hear her story first. Jake and Ashley stood up and walked toward the back. They were taking a short break before diving back into their talk. Once in his office, Jake took out his phone, sat at his desk, and called his wife. "Hey, baby," Claire's voice came through the phone. "Hi, honey." He tried to sound calm, but he probably didn't succeed. Claire sensed it right away. "What's wrong?" she asked. Jake smiled and shook his head. His wife could read him like a book, and that was one reason he loved her so much. "I had an unexpected visitor today." "Oh, who?" Jake paused. He knew he was about to surprise her. Then he said, "Ashley." There was a long silence, so long that he thought the call dropped. "Ashley?" Claire asked, breaking the quiet. "You mean the Ashley?" Her voice held shock and disbelief. "Yes." "Oh, wow, what? How?" "She just showed up. And it went like that?" Her excitement made Jake smile. He knew she would react this way. "I'll tell you everything later, honey. he said. "I just wanted to return your call. When you called before, we were deep into it." "But what did you talk about?" Her excitement was clear even over the phone. "What did she say? Did you tell her about the letters or your tattoo? What about the trust?" Honey, calm down." He loved her so much for how excited she was. "I promise I'll tell you everything later, okay?" "That's not fair, Jake," she playfully whined. "I need to know. I can't believe it. At least give me a hint. I won't be able to wait until tonight, please?" He chuckled. She was talking fast and using that cute voice she knew would get to him. He loved her for that. "Fine," he agreed, giving her a quick summary. He knew she wouldn't let it go if he kept her completely in the dark. "She came in. It took me nearly 2 hours to figure out it was her, and we talked." "But what did you talk about?" He smiled at her eagerness. "I told her my side of the story. We haven't even gotten to her side yet." Jake paused, trying to choose his words carefully. "But," he continued in a serious tone, "it's clear she's been through a lot lately. Her clothes looked messy and her hair was all over the place. I thought she might be low on money even if she hadn't said so yet. I was thinking I should—" Claire gasped. "But she needs to come home with you." She said it like it was very clear. "We need to help her." Jake smiled. She knew what he was thinking. "I know, hun, I was just going to say that, but the big question is, does she want to?" Claire gasped again. "You haven't asked her yet? What were you thinking?" "Well, we haven't gotten that far." "You need to go over there, Jake Martin, and invite her. She is your daughter, and it's your job to help. And don't take no for an answer." Jake did not reply right away. She was correct. They had been avoiding talking about Ashley, but he was out of reasons to hold back. It was time to make a decision. "Jake," Claire's voice broke into his thoughts. "I hear you. I was just thinking. You're right, I didn't bring up the tough stuff because I didn't want to hurt her more." He paused, remembering how hard it had been for Ashley. His eyes filled with tears. His voice broke as he said, "It was hard to see her struggle." "Oh, Jake," Claire said softly, full of care, "I didn't mean to be harsh. You're a good man and a good dad. Just do what is right and everything will work out." Jake wiped his tears and cleared his throat. "I'm not mad at you. You're right. She is my daughter and I will help her. I love you, babe." He could hear the warmth in her voice. "Just make sure she comes home. We have enough space and I want to meet her. I'll try my best." "Good. What time will you be home?" he asked, changing the topic. "A little after 5. And the kids?" "About 5:30. "Okay. Can you grab something to eat on the way, maybe Chinese or pizza?" "I'll get Chinese. Pizza's a little out of the way." "All right. Sounds good. I'll see you later. Love you. And tell Ashley I can't wait to meet her." "I will. Love you too," Jake said before ending the call. Walking out of the back office, Jake felt confident. He was going to do what Claire said. Ashley needed him, but he also needed her. He loved his stepchildren and could never replace them, but Ashley was his own. He had lost her years ago, and now he had a chance to fill that emptiness. Even when his life was good, something was missing. He needed his daughter and would do whatever it took to help her. When he reached the table, he smiled at the sight of Ashley and Sophie laughing hard at something Garrett was saying. "And then, your dad looks confused and has no idea why everyone is laughing." Garrett noticed Jake there for the first time. Jake knew the story Garrett was telling. He smiled and shook his head. It was one of the most embarrassing yet funny things that had happened to him. Laughing, Garrett kept going. "Nobody says anything for an hour until this guy, who is drunk, walks up to your dad, pats him on the back and says, 'Dude, your pants are down.'" Ashley and Sophie burst out laughing. Jake shook his head, amused. Only Garrett would tell Ashley such an awkward story. But he knew Garrett and Sophie wanted Ashley to feel welcome. They knew him well enough to guess what he was planning. He was lucky to have such good friends. "And then," said a nearly hysterical Garrett, "your dad reaches back and—" "Okay, that's enough," Jake interrupted, trying to look serious. "Ashley doesn't need to hear this." Garrett and Sophie pretended to look sorry, but they couldn't hold back their laughter. Jake tried to stay stern, but soon joined in the fun. Ashley laughed too. "Don't you two have work to do?" Jake asked when the laughter calmed down. Garrett wiped tears from his face. Yeah. But we wanted to give Ashley a little taste of who her dad really is." Yeah, boss, Sophie teased with a grin. She needs to know what she's getting into. Ashley giggled, which made Garrett and Sophie start laughing again. What am I going to do with these two? Is there a picture from that night? Garrett asked. Ashley and Sophie looked shocked. That's enough, Jake said firmly this time. He tried to keep a straight face, but Garrett's grin made him chuckle again. He could never control Garrett. All right, I mean it. Back to work. We're leaving soon. Happy hour starts soon. Now go. Garrett stood up. Okay, we're leaving. He looked at Ashley. It was nice to meet you. Yeah, Sophie said, giving Ashley a hug. We tease your dad, but he's a good guy. Don't forget it. Ashley hugged back. I won't, and thank you for everything, both of you. Sophie let go, winked at Jake, and followed Garrett to the kitchen. They're really nice. I like them, Ashley said as she sat down. Jake smiled. Yeah, they are great. Garrett has been with me from the start, and Sophie has been here almost 5 years. He added, pretending to be annoyed. But they really don't know when to keep quiet. Ashley laughed a little, but then her face got serious. So, we're leaving soon? She asked carefully. There was a question in her eyes. He guessed what she was thinking, but she seemed scared to say it. So he chose to follow Claire's advice and just go for it. Taking a deep breath, he said, I just got off the phone with my wife. Ashley's eyes went wide. Wife? It was clear she had no idea Jake had a family and was worried about what that meant for her. He needed to calm her fears right away. Yes, her name is Claire and she really wants to meet you. Now that really surprised her. But, two? Jake reached over and took her hand again. Calm down, sweetheart. Yes, I have a wife and 2 kids. Well, they are actually my stepkids, but I adopted them, he added, hoping to ease her fears a bit more. Kara is just a couple of months younger than you, and Carter is 16. I met Claire about 8 months after I signed the papers, and she helped me. Jake paused to see how Ashley was reacting. When she didn't say anything, he went on. After your mom took you for good, I was a wreck. I was always angry. I didn't want to live anymore. Money was tight, but I stayed with my mom for a while and then some friends. Then I met Claire, he said with a smile. Thinking about Claire always made him happy. Her husband left her with 2 little kids. She helped me get back into life and showed me that I could be loved again. He paused again, took a deep breath and said, She saved me. I wouldn't be here without her, and she wants to meet you. She wants to meet me? Ashley asked, as if she couldn't believe it. But why? Tears began to fill her eyes. Yes, she knows all about you. So do Kara and Carter. They would all love to meet you. They would? She asked in surprise. He smiled. Yeah, Claire's exact words were, Tell Ashley I can't wait to meet her. So, will you come with me? Hope appeared on her face. So he continued, And more importantly, I want you to come home, Ashley. He wanted his daughter home, but was this what she truly wanted? He noticed that she heard him use the word home. He wanted her to come home, and if she had any doubt about what he wanted, it just vanished. Holding his breath, he waited for her answer. She didn't say anything for almost a minute. It looked like she was deep in thought. He realized he had been holding his breath. When he exhaled, it snapped Ashley back to reality. Her tear-filled eyes met his. Then she said, Okay. Tears started to fall down her cheeks. Without thinking, he stood up and hugged his daughter tightly. This time, she didn't fight it. She accepted it willingly. Ashley held on to him like she needed him. He wondered if she remembered what it felt like to be hugged by a dad. He didn't think that guy Kevin would hug her like this, but that didn't matter now. His little girl was coming home where she belonged. Caught up in the moment, he said the first thing that came to his mind. I love you. Ashley tensed in his arms. He held still. Did he just ruin the moment by speaking? He felt stupid, but his worry disappeared when she sighed and relaxed against him. He hoped she would say it back, but she didn't. It was okay, though. They had time to make up for everything they had lost. You okay? He asked, breaking the silence. Yeah. Why don't we get out of here and go home? Ashley pulled back, looked up at him and nodded. Letting go of her, Jake was surprised to see Ashley pull out a small suitcase from under the table. He hadn't even noticed it was there. She smiled shyly at him. Taking her hand, he led her through the room, nodding to a smiling Garrett, and out the back door where his truck was parked. He tossed her suitcase in the back, helped her inside, got in the driver's seat, and drove off toward home. Jake couldn't remember when he had felt this happy. He hadn't been unhappy before, but something had always been missing. Now that missing piece was here. Everything felt right. He looked over at Ashley and smiled, but that smile disappeared fast. She looked very nervous. He had been so caught up in his own thoughts that he forgot she was stepping into the unknown. He knew his family would welcome her, but she didn't. He felt bad. Here he was, feeling great, and his daughter was scared. He reached out and held her hand. She squeezed it in return, glanced at him, and gave him a small smile, but her nerves were clear. Sighing, he focused on the road, realizing there was still a long way to go. "Wow," Ashley said with wide eyes as they pulled into the driveway. Jake smiled at her reaction. He felt proud of his home. "It's beautiful," Ashley whispered. Jake couldn't agree more. His home was beautiful. He pressed a button above him, and the garage door began to rise. They entered his large, 5-bedroom, 3.5-bath, white Spanish-style house with orange roof tiles. Pulling in and turning off the engine, Jake nudged a still-shocked Ashley. "Come on, let me show you around." She nodded. If Ashley was surprised by the outside, she was amazed by the inside. They stepped into the family room with its terracotta tiles, pretty area rug, and wood, fabric, and leather furniture. There was also a big flat-screen TV. Jake couldn't help but grin. "Come on, follow me." He grabbed her bag and placed it by the couch, then led Ashley on a tour. Jake showed Ashley the kitchen next to the living room. It had nice stone counters and shiny metal appliances. Then he pointed to the dining room with its lovely dark wooden table and chairs. They also had a formal living room that they never used. But his favorite part of the house was the backyard. When they stepped outside, Ashley saw the beautiful pool, the patio around it, the big grill, and the simple but pretty plants. "Wow," she said, amazed. Jake smiled widely. He and Claire, who worked as an office manager for a construction company, had done well for themselves. They could afford such a nice house. Jake loved taking care of it. Since he did not have to start work until noon and woke up early, he spent most mornings keeping the house nice. The backyard was his favorite place. "Come on," he said. "Let's go back inside. I'll show you your room." Ashley stopped in her tracks. My room?" she asked, surprised as if this was too good to be true. "Of course. You can have the spare room. It's perfect for you," he replied. Ashley's eyes were wide as she just nodded and followed Jake back into the house. He picked up her bag and led her to the front entrance, then up the stairs. When they reached the top, Jake noticed Ashley had stopped. She stood looking at the family photos lined up on the wall. She set her bag down, and he joined her. She was staring at a photo partway up the wall. In it, a pretty woman with light blonde hair wore a tasteful blue bathing suit. A blonde girl, about 9 or 10, was in a pink bathing suit next to a bare-chested boy, maybe 7 or 8, wearing green swim trunks. And there was a younger Jake, in black swim trunks. "That picture was taken a few years after we got married," Jake said, making Ashley turn to him with a dreamy look. He put a gentle arm around her, not sure what thoughts were going through her mind, but he could guess. She turned back to the photo when something caught her eye. She leaned closer to look at a tattoo over Jake's heart. The photo was not very big, so she had to squint, but she could clearly see it was a name. Her name. Ashley gasped and looked at him. That? Yes, he quickly replied. "I have your name tattooed over my heart. I got it before I married Claire. She encouraged me to get it." He took her hand and put it over his heart. Ashley was speechless again. That seemed to happen a lot this day. "Come on," Jake said. "Let me show you something else." Without waiting for her to respond, he took her hand again and led her to the last photo at the top of the stairs. It was a picture of a younger, smiling Jake holding a happy little girl with straight brown hair, dressed in a blue and purple dress. Jake watched as Ashley looked at the photo. He couldn't see her face clearly, but he noticed a tear rolling down her cheek. He put an arm around her, and she leaned into him. "This feels so good." "This was taken on your 2nd birthday," he said. "It's one of the few photos I have of you. I hang it here so I can see it every morning when I come downstairs." Ashley remained silent as she continued to look at the photo. The moment became long and quiet. Jake started to worry about how she felt until she finally turned to him with an unreadable expression. Wiping her eyes, she said, "I'm sorry." That caught Jake off guard. He looked at her, puzzled. "Sorry? For what? You have nothing to be sorry for." "Yes, I do. I've thought the worst of you for a long time, and now I see how wrong I was. When I saw you earlier, before you knew who I was, the picture I had of you didn't match what I saw. You seemed so nice and everyone liked you. You weren't the bad person I thought. Even after everything today, I still had doubts. So I'm sorry," she said, crying harder. "Oh, sweetheart," Jake said, pulling her into a tight hug. "It's not your fault. Please don't say that. Your mother is to blame, not you." "Shh, shh," he said softly, rubbing her back. As he held Ashley, he remembered their talk in the bar. He had tried to tell her she wasn't at fault, but now he knew she still believed she was. It broke his heart. Damn it. This is going to be harder than I thought. He held her until her crying slowed. Then he picked up her bag and said, "Come, let's get you settled in your room. Then I want to show you something, okay?" Ashley nodded and followed Jake down the hall to the second door on the right. He opened the door and stepped in, with Ashley behind him. She looked around at the room. It was nicely decorated, with soft cream walls, a queen bed with matching furniture, and a big cozy chair in the corner. "Over here is the bathroom," he said, pointing to the door on the right. He opened it for her to see a good-sized bathroom filled with beauty products. She looked at Jake, confused. He smiled. "It's a Jack and Jill bathroom, so you and Kara will share it. Her room is through that door," he said, pointing to the door on the other wall. "There's a bathroom down the hall that Carter uses too." Ashley nodded. Jake turned back to the room and pointed to a set of double doors. "That's the closet. It's really big. There's plenty of space for all your clothes. I know having enough closet space is really important." But when he saw the embarrassed look on Ashley's face, he stopped talking. He noticed her small suitcase on the floor by the door. Suddenly he realized why she only had a small suitcase. His comment about clothes made her even more embarrassed. Jake had been picking up little hints about her situation, but they hadn't talked about it yet. Remembering Claire's advice, he decided it was time to change that. "Come here, Ashley," Jake said, sitting down on the bed. She walked over slowly and sat down without looking at him. He gently lifted her chin so she would meet his eyes. "You don't need to feel embarrassed around me. You can tell me anything, all right?" She didn't answer. Not wanting to let it go, he continued, "I'm really sorry if I made you uncomfortable, but there's nothing wrong with talking. I'm here for you no matter what." Ashley looked away. She focused on her small suitcase for a moment, then looked back at him. Tears filled her eyes and her lower lip started to shake. Jake could see she wanted to talk but couldn't find the words. He needed to help her open up. "It's okay. Talk to me," he said gently. He held her gaze, hoping to show her that she was safe with him. After a moment, she nodded slightly, and then she started to spill everything. "I need help. I don't know what to do. A week ago, I found out my mom has been lying to me. I didn't know where to turn, so I found you. I need to know the truth. I have nothing left. My things were stolen. I have no money or anyone to help me. Please, help me." Jake hugged her tightly again. She shook as she cried, and he felt heartbroken seeing her in so much pain. He wanted to take her hurt away, but didn't know how, so he just held her. When her crying calmed down a bit, he let her go and handed her some tissues from the nightstand. She wiped her tears. Cupping her face, he made her look at him again. "Ashley, you do have people who care about you. You have me, Claire, Kara, Carter, Garrett, Sophie, lots of people. You are not alone. Do you understand?" Ashley looked at him, but she didn't seem to believe it. He could tell she was having trouble accepting that so many people wanted to help her. It was clear that growing up, her mom hadn't provided her with enough support. It would take time for her to believe this new idea. Talking about it wouldn't be enough. It would take actions from him and his family to prove it. In disbelief, she said, "But how can so many people who don't really know me want to help?" "Because that's what family does. You might not know each other well yet, but you are family, and family helps each other." She still looked unsure. It was time to show her that he really meant it. "Come on, follow me," he said as he stood up and took her hand. He led her to the door across the hall to his office/music room. Ashley's eyes widened when she saw all the guitars on the walls. Jake and Claire didn't spend a lot of money on fancy things, but guitars were different. Jake loved guitars. "Sit," he instructed. Ashley sat on the sofa across from his desk. Jake took a seat in his chair and said, "I know it's hard to accept that you have support. It can be overwhelming, but it's true. It will take time for you to feel comfortable, but you have a home here for as long as you want. You're my daughter, and this is your home." He spoke with strong feeling to make sure she understood. He could see she still didn't fully believe it, so he needed to show her he had thought about her all these years and wanted her here. He opened a drawer and took out a manila folder filled with papers. He paused for a moment to gather his thoughts, hoping this would ease her fears. He opened the folder and pulled out several sealed envelopes marked "Return to Sender" in red ink. "Here," he said, handing them to her. Ashley took the envelopes and looked through them, reading the addresses. When she finally reacted, it wasn't what Jake expected. "Ashley?" he asked, surprised. "That woman!" she exclaimed angrily. Jake was taken aback. Something was clearly wrong, and he needed to know more. "Wait here," she said, standing up and leaving the room. Moments later, she returned with her suitcase. Seeing his puzzled expression, Ashley opened it and pulled out a stack of her own envelopes. The envelopes were already opened. "Here," she said, handing them to him. "I found these last week." Jake took a quick look and recognized what they were. They were the 12 letters he had sent to Ashley over the past year. He knew she was too young to read them, but he hoped his ex would read them to her. Deep down, he knew she probably wouldn't, but sending them made him feel a bit better. In each letter, he wrote about how much he missed Ashley and how much he loved her. Even though he never got a reply, he kept sending the letters until the 13th one was returned, marked "Return to Sender." He tried sending it again, thinking it was an accident, but it came back once more. He wasn't sure if they had moved or if his ex was sending them back. He sent 4 more, but they all came back too. That's when he knew it was over. He remembered how sad he was and thought that if it weren't for Claire, he might not have gotten through it. "She hid them from me," Ashley said, breaking into Jake's thoughts. He looked up and saw her glaring at him, clearly upset. "How did you get these?" he asked. Ashley looked down for a moment, took a deep breath, and when she looked back at him, she seemed strong. Jake felt a rush of pride seeing this strength in his daughter. She had been through a lot, but was showing a courage that reminded him of himself. "About a week ago," she said, "we got kicked out of our apartment." This surprised Jake, but he stayed quiet while she spoke. "When I got home from school, all of our things were on the street. Most of it was gone. Almost all my clothes were missing. So was most of our furniture." She paused, looking troubled. Jake didn't know what to say. He wanted to hear her story. Even though it would be hard for Ashley to share, he thought it would help her in the long run. He learned that hiding things only made everything worse. She continued with a serious face. "Mom lost her job. She had a boss she hated. She never told me exactly what happened, but they fired her. I had a part-time job, but it wasn't enough to help. She didn't tell me how bad things were. I came home on the last day of school to find all our stuff on the curb and a note on the door. I started Wait," Jake interrupted. Something didn't make sense. "What about Kevin? Doesn't he have a job?" Ashley looked puzzled for a moment, then her face changed as she understood. Kevin left years ago." Now Jake was really shocked. "What?" Ashley nodded. "Yeah, he left when I was 9. Jake was speechless. He couldn't believe it. After we moved up north," she went on, "we stayed with Kevin's uncle for a while. Mom got pregnant again, and we needed a bigger place." She paused. Jake could see she was trying to think things through. Holding up the returned letters, she said, "That's probably when these were sent back." She was probably right. The timing matched. They had moved. Jake learned from his lawyer that they were living with Kevin's uncle. But once the letters started coming back, he felt too tired to keep trying. But Kevin left after they had another child? Jake knew there was a chance they would have more kids, but Kevin didn't stay around for long. "Figures," Jake said, frowning. Ashley frowned too. "Yeah." He could tell she felt the same way. "After what I found out today, it makes sense he wouldn't stick around. What did Mom think? Only a lowlife would sleep with a married woman." She sounded bitter, which made Jake smirk. Ashley smirked back. Despite everything, she was showing strength, and he liked it. In that way, she was like him, and it proved that nature was stronger than nurture. "Do you know where he went?" Jake asked. "No. After he left, Mom wouldn't talk about him. Every time I mentioned him, she'd yell at me." Jake frowned to himself. It was no wonder Ashley felt like she was to blame for her mom's problems. "So what happened after he left?" he asked gently. He could see Ashley was tired and emotional. "We had to move again. She couldn't pay for the apartment we were living in. So we got a smaller place where I had to share a room with my brother. Things were tough for a while, but eventually she got a better job. Mom went on some dates, but never got serious with anyone else. We lived in that apartment until the eviction when I found the letters." Jake gave her a questioning look and she continued. "I started looking through the pile of stuff to see if I could save anything. I picked up whatever clothes and personal things I could find." She started to breathe faster. "Then I found some boxes I'd never seen before, and that's where I found the letters. I read them and realized Mom had hidden them from me all this time, so I decided to get the truth myself." "Does your mom know you found them?" "Yeah, I confronted her," she replied, frustrated. "She denied everything. When I showed her the letters, she still tried to deny it, but I knew she was lying by the look on her face. She made up some story that it must have been Kevin's fault. I know for sure Kevin wouldn't have kept them. He hated you." Ashley was furious now. "I really lost it and had to know the truth. We ended up in a big argument and said some awful things to each other. I told her to leave me alone, and then I walked out. I went to a friend's house, searched for you online, gave my job notice, and bought a bus ticket with my last paycheck. I had to see if what I heard was true." She took a deep breath when she finished. Jake didn't know what to say. He had thought about what her life might be like all these years. Many ideas had crossed his mind, but now that he knew the truth, he felt confused. They sat quietly together. He looked at Ashley, and his heart ached. She looked so tired, as if she just wanted to sleep. He knew it was time to finish their talk, but there were still a few more things to discuss. "Did Kevin treat you all right?" he asked. He needed to know this for his own peace of mind. The idea of Kevin being rough with his little girl made his stomach churn. She shrugged slowly. "I guess. He always reminded me that he wasn't my real dad, and he never hugged me or anything like that, but he didn't treat me badly either." She paused. Jake could see that she was having a hard time finding the words. "It's okay," he said. "Just say what you're thinking." Her lip shook a little. She tried to speak, but then stopped. The silence stretched on. Just as Jake was about to encourage her again, she finally said, He always said you were a bad person, eh? And I believed him. I'm sorry." Jake stood up and pulled Ashley into a big hug. He wanted to make sure she knew it wasn't her fault. "It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You don't need to be sorry." He felt her shaking in his arms, but this time there were no tears. She seemed completely out of tears. "But it is my fault," she said quietly. "I should have known. I listened to them, and I believed it. Those people. Why did they do this to her?" He had tried to keep his anger in check for Ashley's sake, but now that he knew everything, his anger bubbled up. Ashley thought she was to blame for what happened to her, and he wanted those people to pay for it. In that moment, holding a shaking Ashley close, he felt like hunting down his ex-wife and the man who hurt her. What they did to his little girl was not right. He could feel himself starting to shake with anger. Damn them! As his anger grew, Claire's voice came to him gently, calming him down. "Breathe deeply. Don't let the anger take over. I'm here, and I love you." He could almost hear her as if she were right there with him. Taking her advice, he took a deep breath, and slowly his anger began to fade. He learned long ago that holding on to anger was dangerous. It affected everything in your life in ways you wouldn't expect. He let his anger control him for almost 2 years after the divorce, but Claire helped him find his way back again and again. He came to see that holding on to anger wasn't helping anyone. He needed to stay calm for Ashley. Losing control now would not help her. As he focused on the moment, he could still feel Ashley shivering in his arms. "Are you okay?" he asked. "PP, please forgive me." He pulled back, forcing her to look him in the eye. She looked so sad. With a cracking voice, he said, "You have nothing to be sorry for. You didn't do anything wrong. Please don't blame yourself. She held his gaze. He could see that she wanted to trust him, but the guilt was too heavy right now. She needed more time. More than anything, she needed a good rest. He wanted to tell her about the money set aside for her, but that would probably be too much right now. There was always tomorrow. It's okay, he said more for himself. But you know what? She looked at him with curiosity. The most important thing is that you're here. You're safe, and I won't let anything bad happen to you again. He kissed her forehead, pulled back, and smiled. And we'll get you new clothes. I'm sure Claire and Kara would love to take you shopping. They enjoy that a lot. She looked speechless, like she had finally hit a wall. Why don't we stop here for now? He suggested. She nodded. Come on, let's get you settled. He let her go, grabbed her bag, and led her back down the hallway. Why don't you relax for a bit? Claire should be home soon with dinner. Ashley nodded and then asked, I take a shower? Of course, just follow me and I'll show you where the clean towels are. Jake looked at his watch. It was 5:16. He sat at the kitchen table with a beer, replaying the day's events. Everything felt unreal. That morning he had gotten up and gone to work like it was any normal day, yet it turned into something completely different. He struggled to find the right words. Was it a miracle? He wasn't a religious man, but over the years he had whispered many prayers to whoever might listen. Had his wishes been answered? He sighed. Whatever it was, he still couldn't believe it. Ashley, his little girl, was asleep upstairs in her new room. Tears of joy filled his eyes. Wiping them away, he smiled, remembering the moment he saw her just an hour ago. After he let her shower, he went back into his office to gather the papers he needed to show her. He picked up the phone and called the bar to let them know he wouldn't be working the next day. After handling that, he went to check on Ashley. He listened at the door and didn't hear the shower running, so he knocked. When no one answered, he opened the door and saw Ashley, freshly showered and fast asleep under the covers. He walked quietly to her bed and watched her sleep, remembering how much he loved doing that when they were younger. She looked so peaceful. The sound of the garage door opening brought him back to reality. He looked up as Claire came rushing in, her arms full of bags of Chinese food. She looked excited and was searching the room. "Where is she?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "She's asleep," he said with a smile. Claire's face fell a little, but then changed to understanding. "I guess it was a tough day?" Jake nodded. Claire set the food down, walked over, and sat in his lap. She wrapped her arms around his neck and gave him a quick kiss. Pulling back, she looked into his eyes. "So, what's up?" "What do you mean?" he answered, confused. "What happened?" That was a big question. He closed his eyes, trying to think. What had happened? He still didn't understand it all. Where should he even start? He needed. Suddenly he felt Claire's hand on his cheek. "Come back to me, baby," she said softly. He opened his eyes and saw her face close to his. He leaned in and kissed her again, feeling a rush of warmth. When they broke apart, Claire smiled at him so sweetly that he felt like the luckiest man alive. "So, what happened?" she asked again, eager for answers. He frowned. "They really hurt her. She thinks it's her fault, and I can't seem to change her mind." He could feel his anger rising again. "I don't know what to do." Then Claire's voice soothed him. "Calm down, baby. Don't let the anger take over. Just breathe." Her words were real and helped him. He found himself chuckling as his anger faded. He loved her for moments like this. "What's so funny?" she asked, looking puzzled. "Nothing much. The important part is how we can help her. I really don't know what to do." "That's easy," Claire said. "Easy?" He didn't believe her. "Yes, easy. We just need to be there for her. It will take time, but she will get better." She paused, then added, "Maybe therapy could help." "Therapy?" Jake repeated, unsure. "Yes, therapy. I know it's not your favorite thing, but that's not it. I know. But remember how stubborn you were when we first met? You wouldn't let anyone help, not even me. I had to practically drag you into it. But once you let me help, things got better." She looked at him earnestly. "Right?" Jake thought about it. A lot of people had pushed him to go to therapy, but he had always preferred to handle things alone. At first, He resisted Claire's help, but eventually he let her in. Was he being stubborn again? With Claire by his side, he felt he didn't need any help, but he also learned how to accept support from others. And she was right. Things had turned out much better. "You're right," he said, leaning in for another kiss. When they pulled away, Claire smiled. "I knew it." Jake laughed. "We'll think about therapy for her, but only if she wants to." "Agreed, but we may need to encourage her. She might be as stubborn as her dad." She gave him a playful look. Jake laughed again. "Sure, but I don't think she has any health insurance. We didn't talk about it much, but I doubt she has any. I'll ask Joan at work to get her on our family plan." "Good idea, and there's more. She doesn't have much left. All her clothes were taken, so I told her you and Kara could take her shopping." Claire gasped. "Oh, poor thing. We'll help her with whatever she needs. Kara will be excited about shopping. Speaking of Kara, how do you think the kids will react?" "Oh my gosh, they'll love her, especially Kara. She has always wanted a sister. And Carter? He's easygoing. He'll just roll with it." Jake smiled. "That's what I thought. What do you think about offering her the same deal we did for Kara and Carter?" "Of course," Claire said, sounding surprised he even asked. "Did you tell her about the trust fund yet?" "Not yet. I was going to, but—" His voice trailed off. "Oh, baby, don't worry. Everything will be okay." She leaned in and kissed him lovingly again. He adored her optimism. He didn't know what he would do without her. They were interrupted by the sound of the garage door opening. Jake turned to see Kara walk in, her dirty blonde hair bouncing as she came. "Oh, good! Chinese food! I'm starving! I'm going to head upstairs to Chan," Kara said, then stopped suddenly. She noticed the looks on their faces. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" She could tell something was off. Jake looked at Claire, silently asking if he should tell Kara. She nodded. Clearing his throat, he turned to Kara. "I had an unexpected visitor today." "Who?" "Ashley." "Ashley?" she asked, her face confused. "The Ashley," Claire added. It took a moment, but then it clicked for Kara. "Wait, you mean—" She stared at Jake, her eyes wide. He nodded slowly. "Oh my God! Really?" "Yes." She looked around the room as if expecting Ashley to jump out at her. "Where is she?" "She's sleeping upstairs." "Oh my gosh, are you serious? How? What happened?" Jake laughed softly. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm serious. I'll explain everything at dinner." Kara nodded, looking too shocked to say much. "Let me set the table," Claire said as she got off Jake's lap, giving him another quick kiss. "Have you heard from Carter?" she asked Kara. Kara didn't answer right away. She stood still for a moment, then shook her head as if waking up from a dream. "Oh, yeah. I talked to him about 10 minutes ago. He's stuck in traffic. He'll be home any minute." "Good." Then Kara, who Jake always called his little chatterbox since she came into his life, jumped into his arms and started talking fast. "Oh my gosh, Dad, I can't believe this. This is so exciting. I'm so happy. What's she like? Oh my gosh, I'm going to have a sister. That's so cool. What does she look like? Where has she been? Where is—" Jake chuckled as she kept going. He looked at Claire and saw she was amused by Kara's excitement too. If he had any doubts about his family accepting Ashley, they vanished. But he was still worried. How would Ashley handle all of this? Jake's phone buzzed. He stopped raking leaves and wiped his hands on his shirt. He pulled out his phone and saw a text from Claire. It said, "Finished shopping. Be home in 10. OMG, she's so cute." XOXO, Jake smiled. She used OMG. Kara had definitely influenced her. He typed back, "Sounds good. See you soon." He decided to work in the yard while the girls shopped. He needed to think, and yard work helped calm his mind. The events from yesterday were finally settling in, and he was starting to have some thoughts, some good and some not so great. On the good side, he was looking forward to getting to know Ashley. It might be tough for a while, but he felt hopeful. Well, it was more Claire's hope rubbing off on him. She was full of ideas about how to help Ashley fit in. The night before, she had shared many plans as if she had been thinking about this forever. They came up with plans together. But mostly, it was Claire's excitement. On the not-so-good side, he realized he might need to call his ex-wife. As he raked leaves, he kept thinking, why did she do it? He stopped looking for answers a long time ago. He just learned to accept it. Not that he had much choice. But this was different. His little girl was hurting, and he would do anything to help her, even if it meant talking to his ex. A saying from long ago popped into his head. A real man cares for the ones he loves more than himself. If he had to, he would do it. He needed to talk to Claire about it. Surprisingly, he thought about Kevin, too. For those 2 years after he signed the divorce papers, he wanted to confront Kevin. But as time went on, he tried not to think of him. Kevin wasn't worth his time or energy. Now Jake could spend money to find him and give him what he deserved. But he wouldn't. Forget that guy. He shook his head and smiled. Claire has really changed me. In the past, he would have let anger take over, but not anymore. He had a great life that just got better with Ashley coming back, and he wasn't going to risk it for that jerk. Kevin may have won back then, but now he was the true winner. Plus, he didn't want to go back to jail. He shivered at the thought of having been locked up. Never again. After putting away his tools, Jake gave the leaves a final check. Happy with his work, he walked to the shed to put everything back in its place. When he returned to the house, he washed his hands in the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and sat at the kitchen table. Taking a sip, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Had it only been yesterday that all of this happened? It was still hard to believe. So much had changed so quickly. It felt like a dream. Then he remembered dinner from the night before. He could see Carter's shocked face. He could see Claire and Kara with tears as he talked about everything Ashley had gone through. He felt relief when they all promised to support Ashley as a family. "No matter what it takes," Claire had said. After dinner, Carter went back to his routine, just going with the flow. But Kara couldn't hide her joy. She even suggested waking Ashley. She wanted to meet her so badly. She kept saying, "I can't believe I have an older sister." When Jake reminded her that Ashley was only 2 months older, Kara rolled her eyes and said, "Semantics, Dad." He couldn't help but laugh at that. Then his mind drifted to that morning. Jake made sure to get up earlier than usual. He wanted Ashley to wake up in a lively house. It was a good thing he did. Sitting in his office, he heard noises from her room around 6 o'clock. Crossing the hall, he knocked lightly on her door. Even though she had slept for 14 hours, Ashley still looked tired. She seemed very nervous. Jake tried his best to help her feel better. It wasn't until Claire and Kara arrived with warm hugs that Ashley began to relax a little. Claire and Kara quickly made Ashley feel like part of the group. By the time they all sat down for breakfast, Jake's little chatterbox had made Ashley laugh, even if she still seemed a bit unsure. It was clear that she wasn't used to a loving family. Carter also tried to make her feel welcome. He promised to show her all the fun spots to hang out. Claire was fantastic. She took charge of everything. She even insisted on making omelets, which were Ashley's favorite, even after cleverly getting that information from her. Jake, Claire, and Kara decided to take the day off work, but Carter couldn't. After he left, Claire and Kara began planning a shopping trip while Ashley quietly listened, trying to soak it all in. At one point, Jake put his arm around her, and she surprisingly accepted it. Claire and Kara noticed, and before he knew it, they were all hugging together. Thinking about that moment made Jake smile. Suddenly his phone buzzed, bringing him back to the present. He looked at his screen. It was a text from Kara. "Pulling in now. Need help with the bags." Jake grinned. He knew Kara could go overboard at the mall. After she turned 16 and had to pay for her own clothes, except the basics, she quickly learned to budget. But when their parents let her shop with their money, she took full advantage. As Jake stepped into the garage, he saw Claire's SUV pull in. He was happy to see Claire and Kara smiling, but his heart skipped a beat when he saw Ashley laughing. Claire got out of the car and kissed Jake, making him feel a bit weak in the knees. "Get a room, you two," Kara joked, pulling them back to reality. Jake and Claire laughed and looked at the girls. Kara was used to her parents' playful behavior, but Ashley looked a bit uncomfortable. "Don't worry, Ash. You'll get used to them. They're like big kids," Kara said with a laugh. Ashley was silent. "Okay, let's see how much you girls spent," Jake said teasingly. The 3 girls just smiled and stayed quiet. When he opened the trunk, his eyes widened. There were at least a dozen bags overflowing with goodies. "I'm sorry, I told them it was too much," Ashley said quickly, noticing Jake's shocked face. "Oh no, sweetheart, I'm not upset, he started, but Kara cut him off. "Just ignore him," she said as she grabbed some bags. "He's just being a spoil sport. He'll get over it." She winked at her parents as she went inside. Ashley, still looking bashful, followed Kara with a few bags of her own. Jake and Claire laughed. They knew Kara was helping ease the tension. She was a lot like her mom in that way. Once the girls were inside, Jake asked, "Did you have fun shopping?" "Definitely. She's such a sweetheart. She kept saying we were buying her too much," Claire replied. Jake chuckled. "Well, it seems like you bought out the whole mall." "Only half," she joked. "But we got everything she needs." "Good. So what did you three talk about?" he asked. Claire smiled mysteriously. "Stuff." Jake raised an eyebrow. "What kind of stuff?" "Stuff. But," she said, shifting the topic, "Ashley seems hesitant. We could help her open up, but then she pulls back." Jake felt sad hearing this. It was expected, but it still hurt. He knew it would take more than a day for Ashley to feel safe in a loving home. Claire held his face gently. "Don't worry, love. We'll be there for her. We'll do whatever it takes." Jake nodded. "Come on," she said. "Let's grab the bags and head inside. It's time for the next step." She was right. He sighed, picked up the last bags, and followed her inside. "So what else did you chat about?" he asked. Claire just smiled and didn't answer. When they entered the kitchen, Jake noticed the girls were missing. "Where did they go?" he asked. "Probably upstairs," Claire answered. "I'll go get them." Jake went to the bottom of the stairs and called out, "Girls, come down. We need to talk." "Be right there," came Kara's voice from above. Back in the kitchen, Jake saw Claire searching through the shopping bags. She pulled out a nice brown shirt and handed it to him. "We thought this would look good on you." Without Claire and Kara, he would probably wear the same few shirts again and again. They always chose clothes for him, and he learned long ago to trust their choices when it came to style. "You like it?" Claire asked. "I do," he replied. "Good, because Ashley picked it out," she said. Jake's eyes widened with surprise. Claire laughed. "We wanted to get you something, so we asked her to choose." Jake smiled. "Come here, beautiful." Claire walked into his arms, and they shared a sweet kiss. To Jake, Claire was the most beautiful woman in the world. She wasn't just pretty. It was her kind heart that he loved most. She always thought about other people, and this time, he knew her kind actions had two reasons. The first reason was to get him a nice gift. Every time she shopped, whether for herself or the kids, she made sure to find something for him, too. The second and more important reason was to include Ashley in the plan. This way, Ashley would feel more welcome. He really loved her for that. "Oh, come on, look at Ashley," Kara said with a laugh. "What did I tell you? It's like a group of excited teenagers." Jake and Claire broke apart and faced the two girls. As expected, Kara was smiling widely, but surprisingly, Ashley was smiling too. It wasn't as big as Kara's, but it was better than before. Kara must have been trying hard to cheer her up, he thought. He and Claire were always very loving toward each other, and Kara and Carter were used to it. But for someone like Ashley, who wasn't used to that much public affection, it could feel strange. Claire stepped away from Jake. "Sit down, girls. We need to discuss a few things." "Do you like the shirt, Dad?" Kara asked as they all took their seats. He turned to Ashley. "I do. Thank you." Ashley turned a little red. "Good. Ash chose it," Kara said. "But I guess Mom told you already from your reaction." "She did." Kara turned to Ashley. "See? I told you he'd like it." Ashley just nodded. "Did you enjoy shopping, sweetheart?" Jake asked. "Yeah," Ashley replied softly. "But no. Nobody has ever bought me so much before. I don't know how to thank you." He smiled at her. "It's our pleasure. We want to help you. It's our job. But that leads to something else." He paused and looked at Claire. When their eyes met, she nodded to encourage him. She knew what he meant to say. Looking back at Ashley, he continued, "But just so you know, we won't be doing this all the time." Ashley looked a bit confused, so he explained, "Claire and I talked, and we decided to offer you the same deal as we did for Kara and Carter. We don't allow anyone to live here without doing their part. We believe that by the age of 16, everyone should learn how to take care of themselves." "But not completely," Claire added. As parents, we still have to provide food, a place to live, clothes, and anything for school, those basics. Oh, don't worry about me, Ashley said quickly. I've been taking care of myself for years. I got my first job when I was 14. I won't be a burden. That surprised Jake. She wouldn't be a burden? He wanted to correct her, but Claire did it first. You're not a burden, Ashley. We're happy to support you, so please don't ever feel that way. Ashley looked uneasy, so Jake said, As I told you yesterday, you are welcome here for as long as you want. This is your home now. You'll never be a burden. He smiled again. And just so you know, I got my first job at 14, too. Ashley gave a small smile at that. Wow, that's so weird, Kara said, looking surprised. That smirk. It's just like yours, Dad. Jake looked at Ashley, and when their eyes met, they both laughed, remembering when Sophie had pointed that out yesterday. What's so funny? Kara asked. Nothing, Jake and Ashley said at the same time, which made them laugh again. Kara rolled her eyes. Oh, no, Mom. Looks like we've got another weirdo like Dad here. Claire laughed. But that's why we love him, isn't it? You see what I have to deal with, Ashley? Jake said, still smiling. Ashley smiled back, and it made him feel good to see her more relaxed. Don't worry, Kara said. We'll get her on our side soon enough. Ashley started giggling, which made Claire and Kara laugh too, but then Jake noticed something. All three girls were exchanging glances he didn't understand. He felt a bit suspicious and asked, What's going on? I feel like I'm missing something here? They just laughed harder, which turned into full laughter. Jake grinned and shook his head. Clearly they had a fun secret between them. He turned to Claire. Let me guess. This has to do with something you talked about at the mall, right? She only nodded, making him smile. Uh-oh, it looks like Carter and I are outnumbered now. Okay, ladies, Jake said playfully. Settle down. We still have some things to discuss. Once their laughter quieted down, Claire said, Your dad is right. She looked at Jake. Where were we, honey? You were sharing the plan, Kara said, still chuckling a bit. Oh, right. He looked back at Ashley. So, we'll support you, but you'll also have some responsibilities. Then a thought came to him. Do you have your driver's license? Ashley nodded. Great. The same rule goes for a car. We'll help you buy a nice, safe, used car. But that's not fair, Kara jumped in. Carter and I had years to save for our half. Ashley hasn't. How can she pay half? Maybe you... We know that, Claire said. That's why your dad and I decided to cover the cost, and Ashley can pay us back little by little. She looked at Ashley. Is that okay with you? Ashley looked shocked. She was speechless. Jake noticed that Kara was looking out for her, and he thought Ashley seemed surprised by this. But suddenly, Ashley seemed shy again, which made his heart sink. Just moments ago, she had opened up, but now she looked uncomfortable again. Still, Kara wasn't quiet. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. We can go car shopping together and find you something fun. Maybe you could get a Jetta like mine, or a Honda hatchback. Those are so cute. Or how about a Bug? I almost thought about getting one of those cars until I found my Jetta. What do you think? I can't afford any of that, Ashley answered. It's okay, sweetheart, Jake said. If you want, you could work at the bar. You can make good money waiting tables or serving drinks. Ashley just stared wide-eyed. Is that what you want, Ashley? Claire asked. We can help you find a job if you'd like. No, it's not that, Ashley said quickly. This is just too much. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Jake assured her. I know it's a lot to take in, but we're here for you. Yeah, Kara added. We're family, and family helps each other. Claire nodded. That's right. So what do you think? Jake asked. Ashley looked back, still overwhelmed by everything, and she knew it was going to get more confusing with what they had to discuss next. She kept staring until she finally gave a little nod. Thank you. You're welcome, Jake said. He turned to Kara. Why don't you help her find something and then we'll go and buy it? Kara smiled. No problem. Oh my gosh, this is going to be so much fun. She stood up. Come on, Ash. Let's start looking. Jake raised a hand. Wait, we're not done yet. We still have a few more things to talk about. Kara sat back down but couldn't stay still. She was too excited. However, just as Jake feared, Ashley looked even more overwhelmed. There's more? She asked in surprise. Yes, Claire said. She glanced at Jake, who nodded his head. She then looked at Ashley. You'll need car insurance, too. We'll help you get that, and we can split the cost. But gas will be your responsibility. Ashley nodded. And we'll get you a new cell phone and add you to our family plan, Jake added. You'll need to chip in every month. You should get the new iPhone 6 like I have, Kara said. Ashley nodded again. Now, Jake said, standing up, the last thing we need to talk about is this. He walked over to what they called the drunk drawer, opened it, and took out a folder with documents. He had tucked it away last night after Ashley fell asleep, waiting for this moment. He came back to the table and handed it to Ashley. Here. She took it slowly and opened it as they all watched. After a moment, her eyes widened. What? It's a trust fund, Jake said gently. She looked confused. A what? A trust fund. Years ago, he looked at Claire. We set up trust funds for all three of you. I don't... She paused, not knowing what to say. A what? It's money for you to use for college or anything else you want, Jake explained. But there's a rule. I can't take this, Ashley said quickly, tears filling her eyes. It's too much money. I've never... She was lost for words again. It's not too much, Claire said kindly. It's for your future. Your future is the most important thing. But why? She cried, her tears flowing. You didn't even really know me. Why would you do this? I don't understand. Suddenly, Jake, Claire, and Kara all stood up and surrounded Ashley. Jake was the tallest, holding Ashley in his arms, while Claire and Kara stood by her. Maybe we went a bit too far. Last night, Jake had shared his worry about doing too much too fast. He had seen what Ashley had gone through before and thought they should take it slow. But Claire had said to go all in. She compared it to pulling off a Band-Aid. The faster, the better. At first, Jake wasn't sure, but Claire convinced him. She was better at figuring these things out. But now he was worried about how Ashley would take such a big gift. Now he knew. Ashley's cries rang throughout the room. Jake felt her shaking in his arms. He wanted to say something comforting, but Kara broke the silence first. You know, Ash, if you don't want the money, I can take it. I could buy like 500 pairs of jeans with $50,000. Everyone was quiet for a second, shocked. And then, to Jake's surprise, Ashley started to giggle. Kara, Claire said, sounding scolding, which only made Ashley laugh even more. Kara pulled back with a cheeky grin. What? It worked. She was right. It did work. Kara had done it again. Jake looked down at the smiling Ashley, and when their eyes met, he chuckled. That made Kara start giggling again. Claire held back for a moment, but soon joined in. Just like that, the tension vanished. Ashley wiped her eyes and hugged Kara. Thank you. She wasn't foolish. She knew what Kara was doing. Kara hugged her back. Well, you are my big sister. Jake smiled, remembering last night. Kara pulled back and gave Ashley a playful look. So, about that money? Ashley snorted. All right, let's sit back down, Jake said, kissing the top of Ashley's head. After they sat down, Jake asked, You okay? Ashley picked up a napkin, wiped her eyes, and shrugged. Her lip trembled a little. I guess I don't know what to say. Claire continued. What your dad was going to say is there's a rule. You can only use the money when you turn 18 for college. If not, you'll have to wait until you're 25. The plan was to find you right before you turned 25 and give you the money no matter what. She said the last part with a knowing look. Ashley was speechless again. Ashley stared at them, surprised by what was happening. Jake couldn't read her thoughts, but he could guess some of them. Do you want to go to college? He asked. Instead of answering, Ashley shot a look at Claire and Kara, similar to the one she had given before. Now that he could see clearly, Jake turned to Claire. Let me guess. You talked about something while shopping, right? Claire smiled. Come on, tell him, Ash, Kara said, bouncing with excitement. Jake looked around the table, confused. Tell me what? Ashley started, but she hesitated and looked nervous. No need to be nervous, Claire encouraged. Just tell him. Ashley took a breath. I always wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't think college was something I could do. Jake's eyebrows shot up. He glanced at Kara, who was grinning. She was going to start her freshman year at a local university in 2 months. She had always wanted to be an elementary school teacher. Most students declared their major later, but Kara was sure and had already done it. But tell him the rest, Kara said, shaking with excitement. Now Jake was even more puzzled. What else? Ashley looked at Kara and then Claire for support. Claire smiled back at her, encouraging. Ashley turned to Jake. I always wanted to be a music teacher. Jake's eyes widened. A music teacher? That meant, she's like you, Dad, Kara shouted. What? He couldn't believe it. Had he heard her right? Kara laughed. Come on, tell him, Ash. Ashley smiled shyly. I play piano and guitar. And she sings too, Kara added. She sang in high school choir and played piano in the orchestra. Jake was speechless. He had tried to teach Kara and her brother Carter to play instruments, but they hadn't been very good at it. Carter chose the bass and could play a little, but never cared enough to get serious. Kara had a rough time with guitar lessons and ended up giving up after months of frustration. She did have a decent singing voice, but now... Earth to Dad, Kara said, snapping him out of his thoughts. He focused on Ashley and beamed. You can play and sing? She nodded. Jake looked at Claire and Kara, who were both beaming with joy. They really did chat a lot at the mall. Tell him how you learned, Ash, said Kara. I learned piano first, then guitar. But how? Jake still couldn't believe it. A nice old couple, Mr. and Mrs. Ogilvy, taught me. They lived on our street and watched us after school while Mom worked. Mrs. Ogilvy played piano, and Mr. Ogilvy played guitar. How old were you? Ashley thought for a moment. I was 8 when I started piano and 10 when I learned guitar. Wow, was all Jake could say, making Claire and Kara laugh. Ashley smiled. They were really kind. I watched Mrs. Ogilvy play, and she liked that I wanted to learn, so she decided to teach me. I got the hang of it pretty fast, but I didn't have a piano at home, so Mr. Ogilvy taught me guitar instead. He bought me a guitar from the pawn shop for $50 so I would have my own. I worked to pay him back, which took me about 4 months of doing small jobs for them. She said this with pride, but then her expression changed. You see, Ashley, Claire said gently, I told you not to worry about this at the mall. Ashley nodded. Claire smiled again. So it's settled. We'll start looking for colleges. But while Claire continued, Jake's mind wandered. He was still in shock. His daughter was a musician. She played the piano and guitar and sang. He always wanted to learn piano, but never did. He never learned to read music, which he regretted. He had learned to play guitar by ear. Wait, Jake said, coming back to the moment. He looked at Ashley. Can you read music? She nodded. Wow. Claire laughed at his reaction. Don't be jealous, baby. She knew he felt bad about not learning to read music. Jay jealous? Ashley asked. Oh, just ignore him, Claire said lightheartedly. He's just being silly. She leaned in and kissed him on the cheek. He'll get over it. Jake chuckled. He loved her so much. Yeah, said Kara. He'll move on, but we should get back to the plan. She seemed a bit impatient. Claire agreed. Yes, we should. Call Rob and see what he can do. Jake frowned. Rob? Weren't you listening when I just said his name? Kara rolled her eyes. You know, the keyboard player in your band. Yes, I know Rob is the keyboard player in my band. But for what? He was still confused. Claire shook her head, chuckling. You need to call Rob and see if he can help Ashley get into the music program. Oh, he said, smiling at his own confusion. Rob was the head of the music school at the university Kara was going to. Oh, now he gets it, Kara teased. Ashley giggled. Okay, give me a break, Jake replied, making everyone laugh again. His heart warmed seeing Ashley slowly coming out of her shell, but she had a habit of hiding when she felt nervous, which worried him. Claire was right. They all needed to come together and find a way forward. He was starting to see that Kara was the key. She had a special talent for bringing people together. She's going to be a great teacher. Well, it's all set, Claire said. Talk to Rob and see what he can do. Jake nodded. I'll handle it. Wait, Kara said. She cleared her throat and gave her mom a knowing look. Jake felt puzzled again. He thought it might be something they talked about at the mall, so he gazed at Ashley, but she looked just as confused as he felt. Claire nodded to Kara and said, "All right, we're good here. Girls, why don't you go upstairs and help Ashley get settled?" Kara jumped up. "Okay." She grabbed a bunch of bags. "Let's go, Ash. We have a lot to do. See you later, parents." Ashley stood up, gave Jake and Claire a shy smile, grabbed the last of the bags, and followed Kara out of the kitchen. "What was that about?" Jake asked. Claire stood up, sat on Jake's lap, leaned in, and kissed him. Pulling back, she said, "Kara was hinting at something Ashley mentioned when we were shopping." Then her face grew serious. "Did you see how sad she looked when she talked about the guitar that nice old man bought her?" Jake nodded. "Well, she said it was stolen, along with a keyboard she bought for herself, plus all her other stuff." "Oh, no. Yeah, so, don't worry, I'll take care of it." Claire leaned in again and kissed him. "So," Jake said, "is there something else you talked about during shopping that I should know?" "Oh, this and that." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Oh, girl stuff." He chuckled. "Oh, right." Claire smiled. "Well, that went better than I thought." Jake sighed. She was right. It really did go better than he expected. All thanks to Kara. "I know. I'm so proud of her. She's becoming a wonderful young woman." Jake agreed with a nod. "But you were right about her," Claire said. His brow furrowed again. "What do you mean, about Ashley feeling guilty?" Jake looked away, worried. Claire placed her hands on his cheeks. "Don't worry, love. Everything will be okay." "I know. I just wish we could help her. We'll figure something out." Then he realized there was something he could do, but he wasn't looking forward to it. Remembering his thoughts while working in the yard, he said, "I have an idea." Claire raised her eyebrows. "Oh? Yeah." He paused, took a deep breath, and looked directly into her eyes. "What do you think about me reaching out to my ex?" Jake listened for their voices as he went up the stairs, but all he heard was silence. That was strange. He expected to hear the girls chatting away as they had been all day. After the girls went upstairs to help Ashley, Jake and Claire stayed in the kitchen. When he brought up contacting his ex, he was surprised she didn't oppose it. She agreed it could help Ashley, but suggested waiting until it was truly necessary. Other than that, she didn't say much, which felt a little odd. She also agreed that Kevin wasn't worth their time and energy. Throughout their talk, they could hear the happy chatter of two 18-year-old girls in the house. More than once, Ashley's laughter broke through, bringing smiles to their faces. Once Ashley was settled, the girls decided to enjoy the new bikinis they bought. So the four of them spent the afternoon swimming and chatting. When Ashley noticed a tattoo over Jake's heart, they shared another emotional moment, but Kara quickly stepped in to help. With that small crisis averted, they kept the conversation light to avoid upsetting Ashley. However, Jake couldn't help but ask Ashley about her music tastes, which surprised and pleased him a lot. Both Kara and Carter liked his music, but enjoyed more modern styles that Jake didn't understand. Ashley, on the other hand, loved singer-songwriters from the 60s and 70s, artists Jake adored. When she mentioned Joni Mitchell, James Taylor, Cat Stevens, Tracy Chapman, and Simon and Garfunkel, Jake almost cried. Kara found this hilarious and teased him, knowing it would lift Ashley's spirits. When Carter got home, Jake threw steaks, corn, and asparagus on the grill, and they showed Ashley what a real family dinner felt like. She seemed a bit nervous at first, but yet again Kara saved the day. In the end, it was a success. Jake reached the top of the stairs and turned right toward the kids' rooms. He first knocked on Carter's door. "Come in," Carter's muffled voice said. Jake opened the door to find Carter sitting at his desk, typing on his laptop. "Hey, buddy," Jake said. "What's up, Dad?" "Not much. Just checking in to see what you're up to." Carter pointed to the screen. "Facebook." Jake sat down on Carter's bed. "So, what do you think about everything with Ashley?" Carter turned his chair toward Jake. "I think it's great." "Yeah, I agree. And it's cool that she's a musician, too." "It is, right?" A ding came from Carter's laptop, making him look back at the screen. He read the new message and frowned. "What's wrong?" Jake asked. Carter began typing again. "Oh, it's nothing." When he finished, He turned back to Jake. "Everything all right?" Jake asked. "Sabrina's being annoying again," Carter said, referring to his girlfriend. "I told you to be careful, but you didn't listen," Jake replied. Carter grinned. "Okay, you were right. Want a medal or something?" Jake laughed. "Smart Alec." He stood up and headed for the door. "I'm going to check on your sisters. Good luck." "Wait!" Carter exclaimed. Jake turned around. "What? It just hit me when you said that. I have 2 sisters now." He thought for a moment and then shrugged. "Oh, well. I guess it's just you and me now," Jake said. "Yeah, we need to stick together, buddy," Carter replied with a smile. Carter's computer made a sound again, giving Jake the hint to leave him with his thoughts. In the hallway, Jake laughed a little. Carter was a good kid, really. Just like he thought, he was taking everything in stride. I really liked that kid. Next, Jake went to Kara's room. The door was slightly open, so he knocked. When he didn't hear anything, he peeked inside. The room was empty, but he could hear the water running from the shower. Now he understood the quiet. He continued to Ashley's room and knocked on her door. A few seconds later, Ashley came to the door, freshly showered and wearing a clean white t-shirt and blue shorts. "Hi, sweetheart. I just wanted to see how you are," he said. Ashley smiled shyly. "Oh, I'm good. Can I come in for a few minutes?" She nodded. Jake stepped inside and looked around. The room looked very different from the day before. It felt lived in. The dresser was covered in new makeup and beauty items. Clothes were scattered on the bed and a chair in the corner. A few posters were on the walls. It didn't feel like an empty room anymore. "I hope you don't mind that we put up the posters," Ashley said. "We got them, and Claire said it was fine, so Kara and I hung them up." Jake walked over to admire a poster of Joni Mitchell while she talked. When he looked back, he noticed she seemed a bit shy. "I don't mind at all," he said with a smile. "This is your room now. You can do whatever you like with it." She nodded happily. He glanced back at the clothes. "Did you get everything you need?" Ashley seemed to misunderstand him. "I'm sorry it's such a mess. There's just so much stuff, and it will take time to organize it all. Kara's in the shower, and we were going to finish." Jake raised his hand. "Hold on, sweetheart. I'm not mad." He grinned. "Believe me, I'm terrible at putting my clothes away. If it wasn't for Claire, I'd probably never have any clean clothes." Ashley turned red. "Oh. So did you get everything you need?" he asked again. She looked around, then nodded. "I think we got way too much. I kept telling Claire and Kara, but they insisted." Jake chuckled. "One thing you'll learn about the ladies in my life is that they love to shop. Don't worry, you'll get used to it." Ashley smiled, but then her expression turned serious. "I've never been close with my brother. He's so young and kind of annoying." She brightened. "But having someone like Kara is great. She's really funny and Carter is so sweet, but Claire is." She stopped, looking for the right word. "Amazing," Jake suggested. He knew how lucky he was to have her in his life. Claire was the best person he ever knew. Ashley nodded. "Yeah, amazing." Jake smiled. "I'm glad you're here with us." She smiled back, but then her face turned serious again. She seemed to have something urgent to say. Can I ask you something?" "Of course, you can ask me anything." She looked a bit uneasy. "Well, it's about the money." Jake sat on the bed. "Oh, well, She looked down at her feet for a second, then back into his eyes. "Why?" It was a simple question, but it carried a lot of weight. "Come here," he said, patting the bed next to him. Ashley moved over, shifted a dress, and sat down. Turning to her, he said, "It's because we want you to have the best future possible." "But you didn't know me," she replied, sounding upset. He sighed. He would have to explain again. "It doesn't matter. You are my daughter, and when the bar started doing better, we decided to make sure your future was secure." Her lip quivered. "But I don't understand." He sighed again, seeing she was struggling to believe he had thought about her over the years. "You feel like you don't deserve it, right?" he asked. She nodded slowly, tears coming to her eyes. He needed to clear this up for good. He took her hand. "You do deserve it. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. The money is for your future. Even if we didn't know you well, we still wanted to find you when you turned 25 and make sure you got the money. And even if you didn't want anything to do with me," her eyes widened, "you would still have received it." He wasn't lying. Years ago, when he and Claire set up the trust funds, they told their lawyer to find Ashley when she turned 25, no matter what. He remembered wanting to give her something to make her future better, even if he hadn't raised her. They thought about giving her the money when she turned 18, but they didn't want to risk his ex or Kevin taking it. So they decided on 25, the age Kara and Carter would have received theirs if they went to college. Ashley looked stunned and confused. "Why 25? "Well, we thought 18 is too young to handle that much money. By 25, a person usually is more responsible, so if it wasn't for college, we chose 25. Ashley sighed and nodded. "Thank you. It's more than I ever dreamed of. I still can't believe this is happening." She paused, looking around the room. "I never thought I would live in such a beautiful house. It." She stopped and looked down at her hands in her lap. I always wanted to go to college, but my mom never supported me. She said it would be a waste of time, so I never believed it could happen." Then she looked up, her face serious. "I promise I won't let you down. I'll make you proud of me." "Oh, sweetheart," he exclaimed when she said that. He pulled her into a big hug. "I'm already proud of you." "You are?" Her face was against his chest, so her voice came out soft. "Of course I am," he replied, kissing the top of her head. She pulled back to look at him, a doubtful look on her face. He could see she was struggling to believe him. That was frustrating. He had hoped they had dealt with all the problems his ex created for Ashley. Looks like I was wrong. Right now, he had to agree with Claire. Therapy seemed likely for Ashley, but the question was, would she want that? He wanted to lift her spirits, so he thought about what Kara would do. He smiled. "Well, it's great that you're a musician. I mean, come on. You play guitar and piano, you sing, and you can read music. What's not to be proud of?" His smile turned a little teasing. "You know, I might even be a bit jealous." His heart jumped when she started to giggle. To his surprise, Ashley leaned in and hugged him. He was so surprised that he froze for a moment. Then he hugged her back. Wow, she hugged me first. He could hardly believe it. His daughter was hugging him. Until now, he was the one who always reached out for the hugs. "I love you," he said gently. Ashley pulled back, a little shocked. She looked up at him, her eyes showing both discomfort and surprise. He waited to see if she would say it back, but she didn't. Give it time. He let go a bit. "I'm glad you're doing all right." She smiled shyly. "Just remember, if you need anything at all, just ask." She nodded. They kept looking at each other, not saying anything. As the silence grew a bit awkward, Jake glanced at the poster of Joni on the wall. He stood up and walked over. He had seen the picture before, but not like this. It showed Joni sitting cross-legged with her guitar. The original was a photo, but this one was a drawing. He had to admit it felt different. He liked it. Ashley walked beside him. He looked over and saw her admiring the poster, too. She turned to him and smiled, so he returned the smile. "What's your favorite song?" he asked, pointing to the poster. She looked thoughtful. That's a hard one." "Yeah, it really is." He meant it. Choosing a favorite Joni Mitchell song was like trying to choose a favorite kid, almost impossible. "Well, it's not Woodstock," she said. "It's a great song, but it's kind of overplayed." He laughed. "Well, that settles it." Ashley looked confused. "There's no doubt you're my daughter." He put his arm around her. "Anyone who says Woodstock is their favorite song isn't a true Joni fan." Ashley chuckled. "I know, right? It's a lovely song, but there are so many better ones like Chelsea Morning, Cactus Tree, My Old Man, Blue. If I had to choose, I'd say My Old Man or Blue are my favorites to play on the piano, but Cactus Tree is my favorite on the guitar." Jake raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You can play Cactus Tree?" Yeah." "On guitar?" "Yep." "While singing?" "Yes." That caught him off guard. He turned to her. "You can fingerpick?" She nodded proudly. "Wow!" He was amazed. Cactus Tree wasn't an easy song, but the finger-picking style and Joni's voice made it hard to get right. At 38, he had worked many years to perform a song like that well. and Ashley was only 18. He had to see this for himself. He took her hand. "Follow me," he said, leading her into his office across the hall. Time for some father-daughter bonding. Claire turned her white Ford Explorer onto her street. Coming back from her weekly Saturday grocery run, she drove past her neighbors' homes, Kara's black Jetta SE and Ashley's blue Honda Civic parked on the curb, and pulled into the garage next to Jake's silver Ford F-150. Only Carter's gray Jeep Wrangler was missing since he was at work. She turned off the car and was about to open the door when her phone rang. She checked the screen and saw a blocked number. She had an idea who it might be, so she answered the call. "Hello." She recognized the voice right away. He had a unique accent. "Yes," said Claire. "I've been waiting for your call. Thanks for getting back to me." She listened to what the caller said and then smiled. "Good. It took a little longer than I thought, but you did what you promised." She nodded as the caller spoke again and said, "Hold on. Let me grab a piece of paper and something to write with." She opened the center console and took out a napkin and a pen. "Okay." She wrote down what the caller said. "Okay," she replied. "Got it." She continued to listen while writing down more details. "No." "That's all for now," the caller said. "I'll send it to you," she replied. She listened to him and nodded. "Sounds good. Thanks again. Bye." After hanging up, she put her phone back in her purse and smiled with satisfaction. She had waited 3 weeks for this call. She tucked a napkin in her pocket for later, stepped out of the car, grabbed some grocery bags, and went inside the house. Right away, she heard music from the living room, specifically the piano and guitar, plus some singing. She smiled. "They're at it again." "Oh!" Her eyebrows raised when she recognized the song. "Tiny Dancer." "I love that song." She put the bags on the kitchen island and started singing along as she went back to the garage for the rest of the groceries. By the time she brought in the last bags, the song had just finished. "That was awesome," Kara said excitedly. "Play something else." Claire smiled. It was awesome. She was always amazed at how talented her husband and daughter were. As she opened the fridge to put the eggs away, they started another song. "Oh, Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters. Must be Elton John Day at the Martin House." The song began with Ashley on piano, singing too. Claire felt chills because of how wonderful Ashley sounded. After a bit, Jake joined in with his guitar, and they sang in harmony. More chills ran down her spine. Hearing Jake sing always reminded her of when she first fell in love with him. Listening to them play together made her happy. She remembered the first time she heard Ashley sing. It was the night of their big shopping trip. She was going upstairs to get ready for bed when she heard the music. Curious, she turned towards the music room and found Jake and Ashley playing You Can Close Your Eyes by James Taylor and Joni Mitchell, with Kara and Carter watching wide-eyed. Normally, James played guitar and Joni sang, but this time Jake and Ashley both had guitars. The guitar playing was beautiful, but it was the singing that really caught her attention. Ashley had a voice like an angel. Add Jake's voice and she was hooked. When the song ended, she noticed tears on her cheeks, but what made it better was the proud smile on Jake's face. What surprised her the most was the guitar Ashley was using. Claire didn't know much about guitars, but this one stood out because it was a Martin guitar, which was also their last name. This guitar was Jake's favorite, and he never let anyone else use it. She remembered when he talked a lot about a special guitar he wanted to buy, a retro style updated to modern. All she knew was that it cost $2,500. Most wives would have a problem with their husbands spending so much on a guitar, especially one among 14. But Claire was okay with it. If that was his only passion, she was fine with it. Plus, they could afford it. And if she was already surprised, Jake eventually gave Ashley the guitar that night. She didn't want to take it, but he convinced her. He said, "It's for all the birthdays I missed. It's yours. Take good care of it." So, for the last 6 months, it became normal to hear music from the living room. Actually, now that she thought about it, it wasn't called the living room anymore. Since they bought Ashley a big baby grand piano, it was now called the piano room. At first, Claire had not liked losing her living room, but Kara made a good point. She asked, "When was the last time you used it?" Claire had to think. When she remembered, she realized she could count the times they used the room on one hand. So she agreed to call it the piano room. She kept putting the groceries away, humming along. After one more song, Rocket Man, she was done. Kara's applause and excited voice echoed in the house. "Oh my gosh, that was so good! You should ask her to perform with you tonight." Claire could hear Jake responding, but she couldn't make out the words. From Kara's reaction, it wasn't what she wanted. "I'll cover for her behind the bar. It'll only be like 5 minutes. No one will care." Jake said something again, but it didn't come through. "Please," Kara pleaded. "That was so amazing. People need to hear it." This time, Kara liked Jake's answer. "Oh my gosh, you have to call Jordan and tell him to come." "Kara!" called Ashley, sounding both scolding and amused. Jake's and Kara's laughter filled the house, making Claire chuckle too. "Oh, Ashley," Claire said softly to herself. "You could do much worse than a nice young man like Jordan." The conversation continued, but Claire couldn't understand what they were saying, so she decided to join them. As she left the kitchen, she glanced at the microwave clock. It was 2:13. "Oh, it's getting late. These girls need to get ready for their shifts." Walking to the piano room, Claire caught a bit of the conversation. "But he'd be so impressed," Kara was saying. Ashley looked shy as she replied, "But what if he doesn't like it? He might think it's lame." Kara rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. There's no way he won't like it. You're amazing, Ash. You're just being silly." Just then, Jake, holding his guitar, saw Claire standing there. He smiled and nodded toward the girls. Claire smiled back, knowing what that nod meant. Kara and Ashley were the best of friends. When Kara said she always wanted a sister, she really meant it. They did everything together. Kara was busy with school and worked part-time as a waitress, but she still lived at home to save money. Ashley worked full-time at the bar as a bartender while studying for her SATs. Rob, the bar owner, was impressed by her singing and promised her a spot in the music program in the fall if she took the SATs. Ashley sighed. "But Dad said it would be fine," Kara said. Jake, their dad, raised his hands. "I'm not getting in the middle. I told Ashley she can do what she wants." "You should really take the chance," said Claire, their mom. This made both girls turn to her. "Jordan would be foolish if he thought you were anything less than great. And if he did think that—" She made air quotes, making Kara giggle. "He's not worth your time." Kara smiled happily. "See, Ash? Mom thinks you should do it." Ashley frowned. After thinking for a bit, she turned to Jake. "So, do you really think I should?" He nodded. "Yes. You're too good not to share your talents." Ashley stayed quiet. She looked around the room, first at Claire, then at Kara, and finally at Jake. Claire held her breath, worried Ashley might pull back. But to her surprise, Ashley smiled shyly and said, "All right, I'll do it." Claire let out a breath of relief. Thank goodness, therapy seems to be helping. "Yay!" cheered Kara as she jumped up and hugged Ashley. "This is going to be so cool." Claire and Jake both beamed. Kara let go of Ashley. "What song will you sing?" "You should do Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatter's," Claire suggested. The version she just heard was lovely. Kara was right. People needed to hear it. Ashley looked at Jake, and when he nodded, she said, "Okay." Kara clapped her hands with joy. "Well, girls," said Claire, "don't you think you should get ready? It's after 2, and your shift starts at 3. Kara's eyes widened. "Oh, no! We lost track of time!" She stood up, looking at Ashley. "We need to hurry." Then she added with a grin, "And if you won't call Jordan, I will." Ashley sighed. "Fine, I'll call him." Kara laughed, hugged Jake over the guitar, and rushed out of the room. Ashley stood, but paused. She turned to Jake and hugged him too. "Thanks, Dad." Claire smiled at the moment. Breaking the hug, Ashley started to leave, but Claire stopped her. "You're going to do great, don't worry." Ashley nodded and leaned in to hug Claire as well. "Thanks, Claire." Claire embraced her back and said, "You're welcome, dear." After the hug, Ashley smiled at Claire and Jake, then followed Kara upstairs. Claire walked over to Jake, took the guitar from him, sat on his lap, and kissed him. Pulling back, she said with a grin, "That's the 7th hug she's given me." Jake chuckled. "You're counting?" "Of course. And don't tell me you haven't noticed she's been calling you Dad more often." He laughed again. "Okay, you got me. I have noticed, but I haven't been counting." She poked him playfully. "Oh, stop. You're such a liar. Who complained to me every night for months about not being called Dad? She looked at him knowingly. Jake tried to look innocent, but couldn't. At least I haven't been counting, unlike someone I know. Claire snorted, then got serious. I was a little worried for a while, but therapy seems to be making a difference. Jake sighed. Yeah, but there's still a long way to go. She still blames herself and gets really angry sometimes. He paused, then looked troubled. I still think I should call my ex. Claire tapped her pocket absent-mindedly. I know, but only when it feels right. They had talked about this before, and Claire always said the same. She could see he wanted to do everything to help Ashley, even if it was hard for him. Let's give therapy a little more time and see how it goes. It seems to be working. Then she smiled. Did you notice how she almost pulled back earlier? I thought she would again for sure. Jake nodded. I did, and I'm glad, but I was nervous how stubborn she was at first. She really, like father, like daughter, Claire muttered. Jake raised an eyebrow. What was that? Nothing. I'll give you nothing, he said, tickling her sides. Claire squealed and laughed. Stop it, you silly man. He knew she was very ticklish and enjoyed teasing her. What was that? He asked again. Stop it. She squirmed in his lap, trying to stand, but he held her tight. Okay, I'll tell you. He pulled back his hands but kept them ready for more tickles. Breathing hard, Claire looked into his eyes and saw love there. He tried to stay serious but couldn't. So, what were you saying? He asked. Claire giggled. I said her father is a great man and I love him very much. Oh, is that what you said? Yep. Well, if that's the case. But he didn't get to finish. Claire leaned in and kissed him deeply. She felt his big, strong hands gently wrap around her waist, and she sighed with happiness. When they finally separated, she smiled. I'm so glad she's doing better. Me too. But whatever you did to help her see therapy as good, it worked. I can't believe you changed her mind. I tried so hard, but... He didn't finish, but Claire understood. She grinned, feeling proud. I just did what I did to her dad. Jake raised his eyebrows. Oh, really? What was that? Sorry, I can't tell you. It's a secret, she said, quickly standing up. Just in time, too. He reached out to tickle her again, but she was already out of his grasp. Hey, come back, he called out as she walked away. Nope, sorry. I have things to do and you need to get ready to leave. Don't worry, this isn't over. You can't run forever. She laughed as she went into the kitchen. She loved him so much. He was such a wonderful man, and she thanked the stars every day that she found him. He often said she saved him, but really he saved her too. When her ex-husband left her with 2 small kids, she felt tired and worn out even though she was only 24. When she met Jake, he was a sad man who kept to himself. But she found him interesting. She wanted to break through his walls. It was hard, but when she finally did, she was shocked at what she discovered. She wondered, what kind of woman would hurt such a great guy? He was everything she had ever wanted. Not only was he handsome, but he had a big heart and treated her like she was the only woman in the world. Plus, he sang beautifully. She never saw a woman who didn't swoon when a handsome man sang to her. What really made her sure he was the one was how well he treated her kids. Right then, she knew he was special. In the kitchen, she started organizing the pantry. The kids, especially Carter, never put things back properly. She moved a bag of pretzels and marshmallows. When she picked up a bag of salt and vinegar chips, Ashley's favorite, she stopped. Looking around the pantry, she saw a few new items that had just started appearing on her shelves. She smiled. Yes, Ashley's arrival had brought changes to their family, big and small. She looked at Ashley's sweatshirt on a chair, glanced at the corkboard with a note about Ashley's therapy appointment, and spotted a pair of Ashley's sneakers by the French doors. She was truly part of the family now. But it was a slow process. After checking the pantry, she closed the door and moved to the family room. She looked around and saw Ashley's things mixed in with the usual mess that teenagers made. She found Ashley's laptop on the end table. Picking it up, she shook her head. She really fought hard for this thing. 3 weeks in, they decided to buy her a laptop. As usual, Ashley protested, but when they insisted, she finally had to give in. She said it was too much and she couldn't take any more. Nothing they said changed her mind. Claire was surprised when even Kara couldn't get her to budge. So calling her stubborn was an understatement, but Ashley finally agreed after Rob promised her a spot in the music program. She needed a laptop for the requirements, so she reluctantly accepted it. But the stubbornness didn't stop there. Ashley needed to go to therapy. That was clear. At first, her problems were small and understandable. It took her weeks to feel comfortable enough to take something from the fridge without asking, and another month before she asked for foods she liked. But by 2.5 months in, her guilt and anger started to take over. Sometimes she would be happy with the family, but the next day, they'd find her alone in her room, quietly playing her guitar. They quickly realized that no matter how much love and support they offered her, it wouldn't be enough. She needed professional help. When they first suggested it, she refused, so they kept trying to convince her, but as the second month approached, her anger and guilt grew stronger. They all tried to help her, but she stood firm. To Claire's dismay, Ashley's issues began to affect Jake, too. Ever since Ashley came back, Claire noticed that the troubles from Jake's past were coming back. Sometimes, especially after really emotional moments, she would catch him looking far away. She would pull him back before his anger took control or before he closed up too much, but those moments were happening more often. So, she knew she had to do something. The question was how. She wasn't going to let that woman ruin her family. That's why she knew how to deal with Ashley. Father and daughter were too much alike. Not only were they both very talented in music, but sometimes Ashley would say or do things that made Claire do a double take. They might not look alike, except for their eyes, but they had similar ways of moving, expressions, and talking. But the biggest similarity was how they handled uncomfortable situations, or rather, how Jake used to handle them. So, Claire decided to work harder to protect her family. Thankfully, Kara was a big help. If Ashley and Jake were alike, the same could be said for Claire and Kara. When Claire focused on Jake, Kara would take it upon herself to focus on Ashley. Claire found it surprising that Kara and Carter were both supportive and didn't feel upset when Ashley received a bit more attention. They understood and were ready to do what was needed. After 3 months, Claire finally convinced Ashley to go to therapy. When Jake asked how she managed it, she would joke that she had special powers, but really she used the same approach she had with him: patience and time. Having been through something similar, she knew building trust was the key. Back then, she made sure never to break Jake's trust. He tested her many times, but she stayed strong, and over time, their trust turned into love. She called it her circle of love. It took some time, but eventually it worked. With Ashley, Claire was just as determined, and it worked too. Eventually. In the 7 weeks since Ashley started therapy, there were some good changes, but many problems were still there. Claire didn't know how long it would take, but she was happy with the progress so far. Surprisingly, Ashley's therapy also helped her husband. Seeing Ashley get better lifted his spirits. He had his own ways to cope, like listening to music. But in the end, they all came together and did what was needed as a family. But the big question remained: why did she treat Ashley that way? As a mother, Claire could never treat her kids like that. When Jake first suggested contacting her, Claire knew it had to happen, but she worried about how it would affect him. He had made so much progress, and she didn't want him to go back to his old ways. Still, that he was willing to make the call made her love him even more. He was the kind of man who would do anything for those he cared about. But for the sake of her family, Claire felt she had to take this on alone. Even though he would help, she knew it would affect him in ways no one could predict. She couldn't take that chance. He was everything to her, and like him, she would do anything for those she loved. 3 weeks ago, Claire took the most important step in her plan. She called a private investigator to find her. Today, when she got the call, she was ready to move forward. Placing her laptop aside, Claire looked around the family room. Her eyes fell on the clock showing the time as 2:26. She felt the napkin in her pocket. Now, she just needed to wait for everyone to leave. The house was finally empty. Everyone had gone, and Claire was alone. She walked into the kitchen, softly patting her pocket. It was time, but she stopped for a moment, feeling a bit guilty about doing this without Jake knowing. She had never acted behind his back before, but she reminded herself, "I'm doing this for my family. It's necessary. Now isn't the time to back out." Sitting at the kitchen table, Claire took out the napkin and laid it on the table. Looking at the name and number, she took a deep breath. Here we go. Claire picked up her cell phone and dialed the number. It rang once, twice, then a third time. She frowned as it rang a fourth time. She had thought it might go to voicemail, and while she didn't want that, she would have to accept it for now. The fourth ring ended. Expecting a voicemail, she was surprised when she heard a hesitant, "Hello?" Claire took another deep breath and said as calmly as she could, "Hello, am I speaking to Gina?" "Yes. Who's calling?" came the reply. Claire's heart raced in her chest. She was actually speaking to her. She had no idea what to expect, but Gina's voice sounded completely normal. For some reason, Claire had pictured her voice as that of a monster. "Hello?" Gina said again, bringing Claire back to reality. "Yes, I'm calling about Ashley." Silence filled the air. Claire thought Gina had hung up until she heard in a sharp and confused tone, "What? Who is this?" "My name is Claire, and I'm calling about Ashley." "Are you her mother?" "You bet your ass I am. Who is this?" "My name is Claire." "I know that. You've already said it, but who the hell are you?" Gathering her courage, Claire replied, "I'm Jake's wife." A few seconds passed in silence, then Gina exclaimed, "What? What the hell do you—" Then the line went quiet. Claire thought she had hung up again, but then Gina said, "So that's where she went. That ungrateful little bitch. After everything I did for her, she leaves me and goes to him? Let me tell you something, lady. You tell that little— Now hold on a second." Claire vowed not to argue with her. She was calling for answers to help her family, but she had to be careful. Being too harsh might make Gina hang up. Taking a breath, Claire said, "First, can we keep things civil? There's no need for name-calling." "Screw you! That little left me when I needed her. You tell her how disappointed I am." "Wait, let me tell her myself. Put her on the phone." Claire took a deep breath again. Right now, she felt like scolding this woman, maybe telling her how awful she was, but that wouldn't help. Claire needed to guide this talk in a way that would help her family, so instead she asked, "Do you love your daughter?" The question seemed to surprise Gina, and there was a moment of silence. Finally, she replied, "What? What? Of course I do. What kind of question is that?" "She's my daughter." "If you really care about her, then you need to answer my questions." "What? What are you talking about? Ashley is in a lot of pain and is—" "What? Let me talk to her. She has to explain what she did." Claire didn't respond directly. She knew if she told her Ashley wasn't there, she would hang up. So Claire kept talking. "Ashley is in a lot of pain and needs answers. She needs answers? What about me? Why did that ungrateful girl just leave? I did so much for her and she left when I needed her." There's the harsh person I expected. Claire wanted to confront her and share the lies she told Ashley, but someone had to stay calm. So Claire said, "I understand how you feel, but as mothers, we should think about our kids first. Don't you agree?" "What are you saying? I always put my kids first. I won't sit here and listen to you lecture me about being a mom." Claire shook her head in disbelief. This woman really thought she was a good mother. Claire felt her frustration rising, but she had to stay focused. "This is for my family." But before Claire could speak, she said, "If you're not going to let me talk to her, then I don't know why I'm listening to you. I have nothing to say, but when you see that ungrateful girl, tell her to call me right away. She needs to explain herself." Now she was really starting to annoy Claire, which was unusual. She rarely lost her cool. "Please don't call Ashley ungrateful," she said, a bit defensively. "She's a nice girl who's hurting and just wants to know the truth. It's the least you can do for your daughter." "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, so you did lie to Ashley?" I didn't lie," she replied. But Claire could hear something in her voice. Was it regret? Yes, it was regret. Maybe she isn't as bad as I thought. Seizing the chance, Claire pressed on. "So you didn't tell her that her father hurt her and hurt you?" What, too?" she stammered. The line went quiet, but Claire could tell she hadn't hung up because she could hear a faint breath on the other end. "Ashley thinks this is her fault, you know," Claire continued. "If you could see her now, you might feel differently. Please, for Ashley's sake, if you really love her, tell me the truth. She's such a sweet girl and doesn't deserve this. If you care about her, please help her." But But Claire was on a roll. "As mothers, we should always put our kids first." Sometimes we think lying is the only choice, but our children depend on us to guide them. Please stop, she said in a shaky voice. Claire sighed with relief, glad to finally reach her. As a mother, she knew a mother's love is strong, even if the mother made big mistakes. Moving forward, Claire asked, "So, what happened?" Silence followed. Claire waited, but nothing came. Just as she was about to say something to break the silence, she softly said, "Kevin." Then Claire heard soft cries. "Kevin?" Claire gently asked. "Why, yes, H. He made me do it." Claire felt like saying, "Tell me something I don't know," but instead she said, "I see. But why did you lie? I get if you wanted to leave Jake, but why lie?" Softly she replied, "My kids were everything to me. I couldn't lose them." "But don't you think that hurt Ashley? She believes it's her fault." "Oh, God." She cried softly. "I didn't want this to happen. After Kevin left, my kids were all I had. I'm sorry I hurt her. I didn't want that." "She didn't want it to happen? What did she think would happen?" Claire shook her head again in disbelief and asked, "But why did you lie about Jake hurting you and Ashley?" "That was Kevin's idea. He told me Jake was being unfaithful. He said he still loved me and that we could start over. He wanted to be a father to Ashley, but he said the only way to get full custody was to lie." "She thought Jake was cheating? That was new information." Claire shook her head again. So Kevin sweet-talked her into hurting Jake. But it still didn't explain her harsh actions. Or maybe it did, if she thought Jake was cheating. "And you believed him," Claire said, more a statement than a question. "Believed him? You believed Kevin when he said Jake was cheating on you. Why wouldn't I? He was." Claire sighed, realizing she needed to be honest. "I'm sorry to tell you, but Kevin lied. Jake never cheated on you." "Yes, he did," she replied angrily. The crying had stopped. Claire was surprised. Here she was, having a conversation with the woman who almost ruined the life of the man she loved, and at first she felt some pity. But now... "He cheated on me," she insisted. "Kevin was there for me, so we decided to teach Jake a lesson." "Interrupting," Claire said. "Jake didn't cheat on you. He is a kind and loving man. He would never—" "He did cheat on me. Kevin told me." "And you believed him?" Claire responded, a bit heated herself this time. "Was there any proof?" "No, but—" "And you still believed him? This is the same man who left you without help. Even if you believed him back then when he left—" "But Kevin told me he was—" "No, he—" Claire started to say, but then she stopped. She promised herself she wouldn't argue, but she felt like saying all the terrible things this woman did. As her anger grew, Claire shook her head. This woman is out of touch with reality. She needed to calm down. Taking a deep breath, she tried to steer the conversation back on track, but before she could speak, the woman said something that changed everything. Claire was not someone who liked to be mean. She was calm, and in all her years with Jake, they disagreed like any couple but never yelled at each other. They always talked things out and found a way to agree. She also never raised her voice around her kids. Sure, she sometimes used her stern mom voice, but she never actually yelled. But now, this woman finally pushed her too far. What she said was, "While I'm sorry for what I did to Ashley, that loser deserved what he got. He cheated on me and I made him pay. He wasn't a real man. Kevin was. I'd do it all over again if I—" And that's when Claire lost it. "That's enough!" she shouted loudly. "Don't you ever talk about my—" she stressed the word, "my husband like that again. Do you hear me, you hussy? You're a disgrace to humanity and motherhood. Only a horrible person would do that to someone." "Fuck you!" the woman yelled back. But Claire ignored her and kept going. "Only a horrible person would do that to someone she claimed to love, but you know what? Thank you for letting Jake go. You don't deserve him. And don't worry. I'll be the mother Ashley needs. You don't have to worry about her ever again. And just remember, what goes around comes around. Goodbye." And she hung up. Claire sat there, breathing heavily. "That woman," she finally said with anger, "she is as bad as I thought." She clenched her fists and hit the table in frustration. "Damn her!" Taking a deep breath, Claire tried to calm herself. Losing control didn't feel good, but that woman went too far. Nobody talked about her husband like that. She hit the table again, feeling frustrated, then shook her head and sighed. "I need to calm down." Covering her face with her hands, Claire sat there trying to gather her thoughts. Yes, she lost her temper, but did she achieve what she wanted? Well, She learned that the woman believed Jake was cheating on her, but Claire knew that wasn't true. It was clear that Kevin used that lie to try to get with her. The fact that she believed it without evidence showed her true self. But would this new information help her family? Claire thought for a moment. Yes, she said to herself. It could definitely help. They knew the truth now, and the reason she called was to find out why. Maybe it would help both Jake and Ashley find some peace. Knowing the truth was always best. But would that be enough? Claire thought about that. Would there ever be enough? She finally wondered. But one question she couldn't answer, because of her own actions, was, why did she keep the letters? If she really thought so poorly of Jake, she would have thrown them away right away. Claire thought hard for a good reason. She tried to see it from the woman's point of view. Maybe deep down she felt guilty? Who knows, Claire told herself. Trying to understand why was silly. The important thing is Ashley found them, and now she's here. That's what really matters. As Claire thought more about the conversation, she realized that the woman actually made her lose her cool. That never happened before. Well, my ex did, she remembered. And then she laughed. Exes and I don't get along very well. But still, she hated that she got upset. She was an adult, not an upset teenager. But nobody talked about her husband that way. She laughed again. It felt kind of good, though. And did Claire mean what she said? Was she thankful the woman let Jake go? Yes, I am. But did that make her selfish? If she was honest, maybe it did, but for good reasons. Jake had to go through something terrible, a time that almost broke him, so they could find each other and fall in love. Did she regret that? Claire thought for a moment, but the answer came quickly. No, I don't. I love that man too much. He's my soulmate, and I don't know where I'd be without him. And Claire also meant what she said about being the mother Ashley deserves. Ashley might never call her mom, but that was fine. Claire nodded, feeling sure, then said out loud, I'm going to be the best mother I can be to her. Taking one last deep breath, she stood up and looked around her kitchen. She smiled at what she saw. This was the home she built with her husband for their family, which now included Ashley. I'm a very lucky woman, she said out loud. Checking the time on the microwave, 5:04, Claire realized it was getting late. She had to get ready. Jake was expecting her at the bar at 6:30 so they could eat together before he got too busy. She thought about telling him about the call at dinner. She was tempted, but finally decided against it. I'll tell him tonight in bed. Let's enjoy the evening. Would he be mad that she did something without telling him? No. They trusted each other completely. He might feel a little upset at first, but he would understand why she did it. After all, she learned that from him. He always put the ones he loved before himself. Then she smiled. Tonight was going to be great. She was excited for Jake and Ashley to show themselves as a couple. And Robin, Garrett's wife, would be there too. Claire always had a good time when wine, music, and Robin were around. Looking around one last time, Claire decided to push away the worries from the last 30 minutes. But deep down, she knew the hard times weren't over. Ashley still had a tough road ahead, but Claire was hopeful. She had not given up when Jake needed help, and she wasn't going to give up now. She would do anything to keep her family strong. But the last question was, will everything ever go back to how it was? Probably not. But that's how life is. Hey listeners, if you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.